He spent his whole life studying martial arts, but instead of power, he got illnesses and constant failures. And in the end, it all ended with his death, which actually becomes the beginning. Because at the last moment, he is transported to another world, Gaia, where magic and martial arts coexist. And he is reborn in the body of an abandoned boy named Luz. And although it seems like a second chance, there's a detail. Black hair and black eyes in this world are considered a symbol of misfortune and a curse from birth. And deep down, when you are labeled as useless from the start, you only have one option left. Break that idea and prove the opposite. Because now he has something he didn't have before, the chance to reach the end. And these types of stories usually don't end just with growth, but with a total change of the world. This content is an original narrative recap by the channel's author, created with a style, its own structure and focus. It does not reproduce the original material literally, and constitutes a transformative work. When this boy arrives at the Empire's best academy with his parents to enroll, they don't even reach the entrance. Two noble brats immediately block their path, mocking them that commoners have no place in the Academy of Arcanists. And just to provoke them, they push his mother so hard that she falls to the ground. Luz is about to lose his temper right there and teach them a lesson, but his parents stop him. They tell him to focus on the entrance exam and not throw it all away in a fight. So he holds back. Seeing that there is no reaction, the bullies seem disappointed. They were hoping for an excuse to beat up a commoner for fun, but that opportunity slips away. What they don't know is that, deep down, Luz makes a promise to himself that as soon as he enters the academy, he will make those nobles pay without wasting another second. He heads straight to the exam location. There are already thousands of applicants there, and most are older than him. But honestly, that doesn't bother him at all. Then the director appears and announces the beginning of the entrance exam. The first test consists of climbing the stairs guarded by students from the academy's upper years. The first applicants are placed behind these guards, and only a total of 1,000 aspirants will pass. The exam works on a first-come, first-served basis, and once the passes run out, the exam will end. With that, the exam begins. All the boys start running up the stairs, thinking this test will be a piece of cake. But suddenly, a very mean senior student stands up and introduces everyone to hell. He releases something dark, something red, that explodes into the bodies of the aspirants, terrorizing them, and knocking many to the ground, with their numbers resounding in the air and the word disqualified engraved on them. The other boys behind them are confused, not understanding what just happened. But our boy knows exactly what it's about. In the midst of the chaos, our hero steps forward and tells everyone that what just happened was not an attack. The veteran has only released his aura to intimidate them. Anyone with a weak mind or little willpower would stagger in fear. The veteran instantly notices our boy, recognizing that he is different, that he has character, but there are still many talented people out there, and the veteran doesn't want a commoner to mix with them. Our boy dislikes this bully immediately. The veteran says that since there is a commoner here, he will make him feel it. He unleashes another part of his aura, larger and even more terrifying. This time the weak-willed applicants feel the pain and fear, but for Luz, it's nothing. He stands on the stairs, smiling disdainfully at the veteran, thinking that this killing intent is only weak enough to scare ordinary people. But for him, having seen the cruelty of the world and trained hard, it's nothing. Our boy then unleashes his martial arts and runs up the stairs, countering the veteran's terrifying aura with his own strong-minded skills. Anger burns inside him because he wants to show the nobles what true killing intent is like. He flies straight towards the senior, making a punching gesture, while all the other aspirants watch in surprise. And horrors, even the senior is baffled that a commoner can bypass his aura. But just before reaching his face, Luz stops his punch and realizes the veteran is now sweating. Everyone is left open-mouthed that the boy is only 13 or 14 years old. Yet he possesses so much power that he not only resists the veteran's killing intent, but even throws a punch at him, all without using any magic. Our hero doesn't care about their astonishment. He walks past the veteran and takes his exam card, murmuring that he is too tired of all this. The veteran doesn't take that lack of respect well. He immediately gets enraged and throws another punch at Luz. But at the last moment, Luz blocks it again, leaving the senior student scared and confused. A simple commoner has blocked his hit without even resorting to magic. Just then, the director intervenes. He announces that our hero is the first to pass the exam and reminds everyone that in this academy, all students are treated equally, whether they are nobles or commoners. Above all, they are humans. Upon hearing this, The senior student bows, and even Luz nods in recognition. The director then approaches Luz and congratulates him. Suddenly, he notices our hero's hair color. He mentions that it is quite worrying, although he refuses to reveal exactly why. Luz doesn't like what he hears and feels a strong sense of alarm. Even so, he composes himself and asks the director what he means. The director interrupts him and leans towards him with a stern look, saying that, if our hero is admitted, he will personally prepare a magic potion to hide his distinctive features. Our hero doesn't fully understand, and for a moment, suspects that the director might be trying to test him or confuse him. He calms down again and decides that he will deal with that later. Right now, he needs to focus on the second test. With that, our hero walks away, leaving the director behind, while the noble he defeated earlier stands nearby. Burning with rage, it's the first time the director has intervened in an exam like this, and he did it to protect a commoner. The noble swears he will take revenge for the humiliation Luz has caused him. Soon, everyone who passes the first test is led to the second training field, an indoor stadium. Of the 20,000 examinees, only 1,000 remain, and most are nobles who have received elite training. There are almost no commoners left. Luz walks behind the group when suddenly someone bumps into him. It's another noble bully. He mocks him and says that next time no one will help our hero, and to top it off, he lets out an elitist insult. Luz remains calm and shows no reaction. The bully's lackey adds that if the director hadn't intervened earlier, our hero would have been disqualified. This time, our hero responds, calls the noble an idiot, and says that the director, the grandmaster, has much better judgment than low-ranking nobles like them. The bully doesn't like being spoken to like that, and threatens to knock Luz unconscious. Our hero only smiles mockingly, which infuriates the noble even more. The bully throws a punch at his face, but in the last second, Luz steps aside. He executes a precise martial arts technique that sends a shock through the bully's body. He uses the meridian rupture, a spiral strike that disrupts the body's flow. And the idiot goes flying like a fool. The other bullies run towards their fallen friend, and the scene quickly attracts everyone's attention. The noble who just got beaten up struggles to stand up. He realizes he can't feel his arm, and the rest of his body barely responds. Panic is reflected on his face. He accuses our hero of having used poison, and threatens to report him to the authorities. Immediately, Luz calmly calls him a fool, and tells him he hasn't used any poison. He has only used martial arts. The truth is that our hero has been holding back, because he promised his mother he wouldn't cause trouble. Even so, he has his limits. Anyone who messes with him will face the same fate, or even a worse one. Our hero believes in a very simple rule. If someone dares to hit another person, they must be prepared to receive a hit in return. He raises his fist to strike again, but someone suddenly grabs his arm and stops him. It's the handsome golden boy, Lord Kane, and he argues that, since they are still in the middle of the exam, they must behave. If Luz keeps fighting, he will be disqualified. Those words bring our hero back to reality. He frees his hand from Kane's grip and gives him an annoyed look before turning around. Kane then confronts the shouting bullies. He gives them a cold, threatening look and tells them to shut up and walk away. The bullies shut up and retreat, although the hatred in their eyes remains. Luz observes Kane carefully and thinks that Kane is just like the other nobles, who uses his status to control people. But Kane speaks suddenly and says that our hero is strong and brave. He even suggests that they form a team, if Luz is willing. Before Luz can respond, a group of girls pounces on Kane, begging him to team up with them because they admire him. Soon, even some boys crowd around him, behaving like excited fans. Our hero takes it all into account, but doesn't have much time to think. Suddenly, a small tornado forms in the center of the arena, and Director Smith appears inside it. He announces that the second phase of the entrance exam is a power test. Before anyone can react, a strange glow burns in their chests. The applicants look down, confused, not knowing very well what is happening. Kane quickly realizes that it is an earth attribute. The next second, an intense heaviness falls upon them all. Their bodies seem to be carrying huge weights. Many struggle to stay on their feet. Even Kane grits his teeth as he struggles to stay upright. Then he notices something shocking. Someone is moving forward as if nothing is happening. Kane forces himself to look ahead, and there he sees Luz calmly walking up to the stage. Ready for the next challenge, Director Smith watches with surprise, but there is also clear satisfaction in his eyes. Once again, our hero is the first to advance. Despite the pressure and the overwhelming weight, he walks as if nothing is stopping him. Even after 3 or 4 years of martial training, the pressure and pain are barely tolerable for most students and become even more intense over time. Kane feels the tension in his bones, so when he sees Luz standing there without formal training, and without even trembling, he cannot comprehend what level of skill our hero really has. Director Smith then announces that only the examinees who are still standing will be able to pass to the next test. He gestures with his hand and shows various weapons, telling them that whoever wants one can take it. Our hero approaches calmly and chooses a solid sword for himself, while many other contestants struggle simply to stay on their feet, let alone grab a weapon. Then the next phase of the exam begins, and an unexpected twist occurs. Director Smith announces the appearance of slimes. The students seem confused. Before anyone can ask questions, the director disappears. Suddenly, someone screams for everyone to look up. When they lift their heads, they see bright blue creatures falling from above. And landing all over the arena, they look soft and elastic, almost like gelatin. At first, they seem harmless, especially in comparison to the senior students from before. The rules are announced quickly. Hitting a slime gives 1 point, dodging it gives 2 points. Killing one gives 5 points. Each student's ranking depends on the points they earn, and only the top 100 will move on to the next round. At first, some students laugh and say that the slimes are weak and easy. They rush to attack, thinking it will be simple. But the moment they attack, the slimes become aggressive. They move faster, and they pounce on them with surprising force. Their playful appearance disappears as they attack with fury, rushing over one student and then another. Panic spreads through the arena as the slimes swarm everywhere and turn the battlefield into chaos, while Director Smith and the senior examiners watch everything carefully. According to an informant, members of influential families are participating, including talents linked to the Aranka family and the Duran house. He also points out that there are some questionable individuals among the candidates, especially the boy who finished first in the initial test. Director Smith smiles and says that case seems very interesting to him. However, the examiner adds that for a while now, Luz hasn't made a single move, and they are worried that he might fall behind. Other participants notice the same thing and assume that he has finally given up. But that's not true. Just when a slime is about to attack him, Luz remains calm, with his back slightly turned, fully aware of everything around him. Just when a slime is about to crash into him, our hero steps aside. In 2 seconds, it seems like it costs him no effort, and everyone wonders how he moves with such ease. The slime sparks with energy and launches another attack, this time with even more force, and several of them pounce directly on him. The truth is that Luz didn't come to this exam without being prepared. Before arriving, he trained in extreme conditions, and even asked his friends to throw stones at him. They didn't want to hurt him, but he convinced them because he wanted to test a theory. In his previous life, he hypothesized that if he trained his mind to quickly send information from the parietal lobe to the cerebellum, he could instantly calculate the trajectories of attacks and react without delay. If he could constantly calculate the trajectories and respond in real time, he believed he could handle any attack, so he stood there while the stones flew towards him and activated his martial arts technique. He calculated the trajectory of each stone and dodged them all with great precision. His friends were stunned and ran towards him, asking him what he had just done. Luz told them he had used a combat method called void combat calculation that they didn't fully understand. But for him, that proved his theory worked. Now, during the second exam, our hero activates the void combat calculation again. As the slimes pounce towards him, he calculates their speed and direction in his head. They move fast and hit hard, but the best part is that they can only move in a straight line. That makes the angles easy to predict. Calmly, he changes his position and dodges each and every one of the attacks, earning 8 points in a matter of seconds. Then he unsheathes his sword and uses a martial arts move called forced slash. His sword cleanly cuts through the slimes, splitting them in two, and he gets even more points. Kane watches in astonishment, and even the examiners look at Director Smith with surprise. They can't believe the precision with which Luz predicts the movements. Kane feels excited. Now he understands that Luz is not just any commoner. He is a true practitioner with advanced combat skills. Kane wants to team up with him, especially now because it will be beneficial for him. Another slime pounces on our hero, but just as our hero is about to hit another slime, someone interrupts him, and both face each other for the same target. Luz frowns, thinking Kane is stealing his prey. Kane rushes to explain that he isn't taking anything from our hero, but from others. And then, after properly introducing himself, He suggests they add up points together. Luz hesitates because trust is scarce in this arena. Kane smiles and says they should turn it into a competition and see who wins more points. This catches our hero's attention, and he accepts, betting that the loser must do whatever the winner says. Next, he wields his sword and says he will show what he is capable of. As they stand back to back in the arena, envious nobles see an opportunity to eliminate the commoner while gaining points. One of them shoots arrows at Luz. Luz prepares to counterattack, but before anyone realizes what is happening, the arrows hit him. The crowd holds their breath, thinking he has been hit, but our hero remains motionless. The arrows never pierce him. He has caught all three with his own hands. The bullies look at him in disbelief. Kane immediately asks him if he's okay, furious because they are playing dirty. The archer feels insulted when Kane calls him shameful. He activates a magic technique called double arrow edge and fires again. Kane dodges and cuts most of the arrows in the air with his sword, but one slips past and heads towards him at full speed, about to impact. Blood splatters while Kane watches in shock, expecting the arrow to pierce him. He prepares for the impact, but it never comes. When he opens his eyes, he sees Luz standing in front of him. Holding the arrow firmly in his hand, from which blood flows, Luz asks Kane to calm down, because the attack was actually aimed at our hero from the beginning, above. One of the examiners comments that the attack clearly had malicious intent, and asks Director Smith if the bullies should be disqualified. Director Smith calmly tells them to wait. He states that the bullies will retire very soon. Besides, he wants to observe further and address the responsibility for what happened during the exam later. He also asks the examiner to prepare healing potions, because he has a hunch that Luz is about to break some bones. Our hero asks Kane if he has heard of baseball, but in this world, they obviously don't know it. However, Luz wants to show it to him anyway. Another slime pounces directly on our hero. He swings his sword as if it were a bat, with lightning running along the blade, and strikes the slime hard. It goes flying towards the bullies and crashes into them. One of them takes the full impact. He breaks his ribs and falls off the stage, and is disqualified instantly. Luz doesn't stop. He pounces on the remaining bullies, who are still paralyzed by surprise after seeing their leader eliminated so easily. One of them turns too late. Luz does a somersault over his head and throws a slime ball directly into his face. The impact crushes him, bruises his teeth, and knocks him off the stage, earning him another disqualification. Now only one bully remains, sweating nervously. He doesn't know where our hero will attack next. Panic takes hold of him. Suddenly, our hero appears behind him and provokes him to turn around. Even at that moment, the bully refuses to apologize. He continues insulting our hero, claiming that elders know more and that commoners must know their place. He doesn't realize that someone has placed himself in front of him. The next second, he trips and falls off the stage. The one who makes him trip is Kane. With that fall, the last bully is also disqualified. Kane approaches and thanks Luz. Kane notices Luz's injured hand from catching the arrow, but now it's bandaged. They high-five, and our hero admits that Kane is actually a decent person for a noble. The two boys keep running while the slimes chase them. Kane tells Luz not to compare him to the other nobles, because he is not like them. He explains that there are many important families in the empire, and that he belongs to one called the Aranka family. Important families are clans that have produced several grandmasters and sages. That is why they have enormous influence and power. Sometimes, their authority even rivals that of the royal family, the nobility and arcanist associations. These names and titles are new and fascinating for Luz, who keeps them in mind while they keep fighting. Meanwhile, the bullies observe Luz's battle with great attention. Watching him fight also fills them with envy and rage. They refuse to let someone they consider lowborn take their points, so they launch an attack on Luz. And Kane. At the same time, Kane's loyal followers panic upon seeing that their young lord is the target of the attack, and rush to protect him. In a matter of seconds, chaos breaks out around Luz and Kane, and the students who had come to prove their worth now turn against each other. The arena turns into a free-for-all, with everyone fighting everyone not far away. Faye observes the situation and finds it interesting. She calls her friend Miriana and tells her to join her so they can challenge the other nobles. Luz keeps dodging the slimes using his martial arts techniques, but he also realizes that the students are now attacking each other. He realizes that if he keeps adding points, more trouble will come his way. That's when he sees Miliana making her way through the nobles with ease. Faye also fights with dexterity, and next to her is a red-haired boy, Neil Gunn, who seems almost like a madman. The boy brandishes a hammer with fury and knocks people aside with a punch, shouting that beating them up is more fun than fighting the slimes. He causes chaos throughout the arena and knocks down several opponents in a frenzy. Above them, Director Smith and the examiners watch attentively. An examiner suggests stopping the fight, worried that too many nobles might get disqualified. Director Smith does not agree. He says that watching young talents face off is entertaining. Another examiner argues that losing too many noble candidates could cause problems. Director Smith ignores the concern. He says he doesn't care about public opinion and wants to see how it all ends. Then, without warning, he enters the center of the arena and ends the second exam. He announces that the scores and rankings of all qualified candidates will be revealed later. He lifts the earth magic effect, and healing potions are distributed to everyone. Luz examines the potion with interest. Even a basic healing potion costs 3 silver coins, which is too expensive for him. Kane notices his expression and asks him what's wrong. Then he jokes that he won't mess with Luz, even if he wins. Shortly after Director Smith publishes the ranking, the nobles are satisfied when they realize Luz's name doesn't appear on the list. But the truth is that the top 5 examinees have broken all previous records, and Director Smith announces their names separately. He declares that the 5th place goes to Meliano Reyes, the 4th place to Canaranca, and the 3rd place goes to Faye Durerhan. With 87 points, Luz takes 2nd place, and Kane is completely surprised, not only because Luz has obtained a higher score than him, but because never before had a commoner fought like this. Kane accepts his defeat gracefully, admitting he lost the bet, and asks Luz what he wants him to do. Luz simply says he will tell him after the exam. Then Director Smith announces the 1st place, with a record score of 888 points. It is for the same red-haired maniac who was causing havoc before. Neil keeps smiling like he did during the fight. Everyone whispers about how terribly strong he is, especially because he is also a commoner who has placed even above the heir of the Durans. Miriam appears worried seeing Faye tremble with rage, but Faye quickly swallows her anger and declares that she would love to face someone so strong. Meanwhile, many veterans are furious because the newly arrived nobles have lost to simple commoners. The examiner comments that taking 2nd place is unprecedented since the Academy's inception. And the most surprising thing is that both students also come from an orphanage. Director Smith explains that the Arcanist Association manages the orphanage because true strength lies in the masses and has nothing to do with social status, as some people believe. He tells everyone who has passed the exam to head to the next area. As they walk, Kane mentions that Luz was very close to 1st place and wonders who is really the stronger of the two. Luz. However, he is not worried or curious about answering the question. Soon they all arrive at the Academy's training ground. Director Smith announces that the final exam is the survival test, a battle royale for the emblems, and begins distributing the emblems among everyone. Everyone's goal is to collect as many emblems as possible, and any method is allowed to do so. Examinees who lose their emblems will be disqualified immediately, and only the top 10, according to the final count, will gain admission to the Academy. Kane looks at his new friend and tells him that, for now, they will act separately, and gives him some advice. Those who ranked higher previously will be the target of others, so he must be very careful. Luz promises he will survive no matter what. He knows for a fact that they announced the 2nd exam's rankings precisely to create this situation. Upon hearing this, Director Schmidt simply smiles with a mocking air and tells everyone to demonstrate their skills, because in the end, only the best will survive. When the exam begins, Luz wanders through the forest thinking that admission is just 1 step away, so he has to win no matter what. Suddenly, someone stops and stands in front of him. It's one of the nobles, an NPC, who pounces on him, claiming that Luz humiliated all the nobles in the previous exam. When Luz turns around, he realizes that 2 other bullies are also pouncing on him. No one is going to protect him for now, but they don't know that Luz doesn't need anyone's protection. In fact, it is these bullies who need protection from Luz. Suddenly, Luz sees a boy standing on top of a tree, aiming at him with his bow, and realizes that the reputation staff has revealed his location. Since everyone is there, the bullies attack Luz one by one, but he dodges all their attacks with dexterity. Suddenly, he feels a powerful attack coming his way, and he has to dodge it with his sword, but he is baffled because he doesn't recognize what it is. Just then, the bully pounces on him, even threatening to kill him. But Luz is not willing to give up. He fights against all the bullies, and again, one of those powerful attacks pounces on him, and he dodges it once more. But he is irritated by it. Now one of the NPCs, basically arrows flying with magic, laughs at Luz because he doesn't even use magic. But the next second, he gets frustrated because Luz keeps dodging. On the other hand, Luz is a bit nervous because he cannot calculate the trajectory of the magic. So he has to rely on his martial arts techniques. He uses a move called Zen, non-Zen, which consists of striking before the enemy, and uses their own power against them. Just then, the enemy orders all his companions to attack at once, and they all pounce on our hero. This time he is prepared, he makes his way through them, dodging them one by one, and with his sword he returns their own attacks, making them hit each other instead of him. Even when one of them launches arrows with magic, Luz dodges them at the last second, causing another bully to be injured. Instead, he throws the injured bully as if he were trash, and uses a spear to strike the boy. High up in the tree, one by one, he defeats them all and collects their emblems, laughing at his victory. Still, a fighter encourages his allies to attack again, but this time, Cain takes out his bow and knocks him to the ground. Cain is sitting in the tree, observing our hero with indifference, realizing that he cannot use magic. The fighters are surprised because Cain shouldn't even be there, but he reveals that he defeated them all and forced them to reveal the attack plan. The bully keeps screaming, and Cain hits him on the head with the bow until he finally shuts up. Cain jumps off the tree, and Luz comments that he is safe. Cain says they are just low-ranking nobles with newly learned magic, so for him, it was a piece of cake. He hands our hero the last emblem he had gathered, but then he approaches and says that if this keeps happening, it will be too troublesome for Luz and offers to help. Our hero refuses, saying he will handle his problems himself. All this is observed by Faye, who applauds, honoring Luz's integrity and honor. But she is not here to chat. She gets straight to the point and asks our hero to fight her. Cain quickly tells Luz that she is the granddaughter of the Duran family's grandmaster. Our hero asks Cain if he has fought her before. Cain hesitates for a moment and denies having any kind of friendship with her, but admits they have fought. He adds that he let his guard down a bit during their combat. Luz mocks him immediately, implying he must have lost, and Cain starts to defend himself. Before they can continue with their jokes, Faye interrupts them, telling them to set aside their little bromance and stop flirting. She challenges our hero once again. Cain warns Luz that she already knows how to use magic, and that her skill level is at the apprentice stage, which is very high for her age. He advises our hero to ignore her and focus on collecting emblems instead. Feig starts to mock them, clearly annoyed, accusing the two boys of planning to run away. She claims that Cain is undermining Luz's confidence because he knows our hero cannot win. She even calls Luz a coward, which irritates him. Cain is also annoyed. Now Luz takes a step forward. His pride has been awakened. He says he has always wanted to see how a great family fights, so he will accept the challenge. Feig smiles mockingly and says she likes his enthusiasm. To be fair, she announces that she will not use magic against him. The next second, without hesitation, she charges and unleashes her secret technique. Lance, slam, aiming directly at our hero. Our hero doesn't move. The spear hits him, or so it seems. Feig smiles, not because she hit him, but because, at the last possible moment, our hero slightly shifts his body and blocks the spear with his bicep. Faye pulls her weapon, spins it in a sharp 360-degree move, forcing our hero to let go, and immediately throws another spear. Strike once more. Luz dodges the attack by a hair. From afar, the examiners watch the fight closely. They comment that it's been a long time since they saw the spear techniques of the Duran family. They also point out that Faye's speed and strength are impressive, and call her a true genius. However, the examiners note that Luz is also impressive, and bet on how long he will last. One of them thinks he will lose quite soon. Then they turn to the director and ask him who he thinks will win. The director says sincerely that he likes the new boy, but he cannot beat Feig, because a battle is a clash of bodies and wills. For now, our hero doesn't have much experience. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, dust rises with the combat, and in the middle of it, Feig pounces on our hero. He starts to defend himself, dodging all her attacks. Finally, he finds an opportunity and counterattacks Faye, causing her to almost drop the spear. This irritates her, and our hero jumps over her head, landing behind her. She comments that she can't believe he dodged everything. Not even Cain, from the Oranka family, could have done it, but it isn't difficult for Luz. He observes carefully. Everything becomes easy. Feig takes care of that, and with a challenge, launches her secret spear technique. Crescent Lance against Luz. He instantly analyzes the attack, thinking that spear techniques include threats. sweeps, defense, and suppression, combined with great range, which makes them quite troublesome. Just as he faces a momentary difficulty, he also notices several weaknesses in the use of the spear. For example, the vulnerability in close combat. All he has to do is find the right moment. Get close to Faye and attack. When he finds the moment, he launches an attack, but Faye dodges it instantly. She pounces on him, claiming that her family's spear has no weak points, and creates a tornado with her weapon. The examiners point out that Faye has truly extraordinary talent. Even the grandmaster of the Duran family learned this technique at 16. Combining magic with spear techniques, Faye surpasses all her peers. The boys seem to have lost for now, but the truth is that our hero also has some aces up his sleeve. He uses the sword net technique. Apparently, the other weakness of the spear technique is the high stamina consumption. If our hero keeps defending himself with precision, an opening will eventually appear. But what he doesn't realize is that his sword is breaking. Feig is irritated that Luz keeps fighting. Finally, he finds an opportunity and launches an attack against Feig, but at that moment, his sword breaks, which confuses everyone. Feig even calls it impressive, because if his sword hadn't broken, he would have successfully executed a counterattack. While Luz thinks he is very unlucky, Feig probably realizes that Luz is holding back, but apologizes, saying it's a bad habit, because he likes to observe before giving it his all. Now that he has observed everything, things get serious. Feig thinks they can't keep fighting because his weapon is broken, but Luz is ready. He is better with his fists. Both prepare for the next move. Feig launches an attack against our hero, a spinning charge technique. Kane warns that if Luz takes it head-on, he will be seriously injured. But our hero, fully focused on martial arts, successfully stops Feig's spear at the last moment with his own hands. The examiners watching from afar are puzzled, because Feig's attack is supposed to have a defense-piercing effect. But none of that happens, and they can't understand how the boy stops the spear so easily. Director Smith is impressed and speechless, but Feig is not done yet. She uses her leg to kick and free the spear from his grip. She grabs it again. She charges once more, this time launching a stronger attack, which strikes from all flanks at once. However, Luz is in a state of slow motion and focus, and only with his hands. He deflects every blow. Feig is bewildered, and Director Smith is surprised, because he realizes that our hero is countering the spear technique with a special method that he had never seen before. The Duran family's spinning spear technique is one of the most famous in their world, and stopping it like that means the boy is truly extraordinary. Finally, our hero counterattacks, forcing Feig to retreat. This enrages her, and she bluntly asks him about that strange technique. Our hero answers sincerely, saying it's simply part of his martial arts, and that at the exact moment of contact, he adds a twist to counter the spear's rotational force. The explanation is incomprehensible to Faye, and she doesn't understand anything. With that, our hero approaches her and tells her he will show her with action. He starts moving in all directions while Feig tries to keep track of him and hit him. Watching from afar, Kane thinks it looks like an illusion because Luz moves like a butterfly in flight. Feig feels as if Luz is right in front of her. However, every time she attacks, he has already moved to another position. It almost seems like he is flying. Meanwhile, our hero is determined to show his style. The technique he uses now is called butterfly step, an elegant footwork style inspired by a legendary boxer, with fast and light movements and an unpredictable rhythm that is perfect for fighting Feig. Our hero finally sees another opportunity and attacks Feig, punches her, and sends her flying backward. Kane watches from afar, unable to believe his eyes, and even Director Smith thinks it is unexpected that Luz is able to inflict such great damage on Feig. The examiners note that, even without magic, very few people can defeat Feig in pure combat. And perhaps this boy is truly a genius in close-quarters combat, but Faye is furious, because it's not over yet. She gets up and declares that she comes from a great family with an unbreakable fighting spirit, and that she cannot lose so easily. She throws the spear aside, which confuses Luz. Because now both are entering into close-quarters combat, Feig pounces on him, and our hero uses martial arts techniques like Wing Chun and Pak Sao to defend against her crushing fist. Even so, his defense is not perfect, and Feig manages to hurt his hand. Instead of getting angry, he smiles and ignores the pain. Feig reminds him that her family is not based on weakness. Next, she unleashes the level 3 crushing fist, but this time our hero is prepared. He resorts to boxing techniques, and the two exchange fierce blows. Luz feels euphoric, and something dark inside him begins to stir. He doesn't fight for the sake of violence, but because he enjoys using his strength to the fullest. His presence becomes intense as he stands right in front of Faye, giving off a dangerous aura that paralyzes her for an instant. She tries to block his attack with her hands, but it is not enough. Luz hits her, launching her against a nearby tree. Director Smith doesn't like the look of this technique at all. The remaining students watch the fight. They can't believe a commoner possesses such power. Suddenly, one of them starts to feel sick and starts trembling as he realizes that the feeling comes from the overwhelming aura that our hero is giving off. They are the same bullies who conspired against our hero before and are furious because no one expected a commoner to be so powerful. The other boy who was throwing up a few moments ago feels nauseous at the thought that they must eliminate our hero. Now, if the legend is true, then they cannot let him live. From a distance, they watch as Luz seems almost like a maniac, marching and running towards Faye, who is already wounded. And exhausted, she barely has time to defend herself before Luz throws another punch at her. Sending her into the air once again, he pounces on her, while she is still on the ground. It becomes clear that his strength and his speed are on a completely different level, and there is no way she can win. In this situation, he prepares to attack, and at the last second, fearing for her life, she uses her magic, the arcane martial art, to protect herself and counterattack. The impact launches them both into the air. Suddenly, our hero returns to his calm state and his usual state. He looks at his injured hands and reflects in silence on the power of magic. Kane runs over and asks him if he is okay. Our hero answers that he is fine, although he is not sure how Feig is. Just then, the bullies who had been hiding behind the trees step forward and accuse our hero of having lost his emblem, declaring that he is disqualified from the game. Luz looks down and realizes that his emblem has been reduced to ashes. Kane intervenes immediately to defend him, insisting it was an accident. The bully smiles mockingly and says that the director saw everything, so Kane won't be able to help a commoner cheat today. He steps forward. He tells our hero to drop everything and orders him to leave because he is ruining the exam. He even calls our hero trash who should disappear. But Feig suddenly tells them to stop. Everyone turns to look at her. Luz is surprised to see that she is so wounded and still standing. The bully asks if she is really trying to protect a commoner and warns her that she will be disqualified for breaking the rules. Feig doesn't care about his opinion. She admits that our hero has earned his point and that it was she who used magic accidentally. She apologizes for it. Kane cannot believe what he is hearing, the great Faye apologizing to our hero, but Luz also apologizes, saying that it was he who lost control before, so it should be he who asks for forgiveness. Feig accepts his apologies, although she is still annoyed by having lost and says that he forced her to use magic anyway. She wants a rematch before they officially sign up. The bully laughs and reminds them that he already has 4 badges and that Luz won't even be able to qualify. But the next instant, Feig tears a piece of cloth from her outfit and hands it to Luz. It represents the 14 emblems she has gathered. Just like that, our hero gets ahead of the bullies. Before leaving, she mocks Kane and tells the bullies that the weak shouldn't pass, and that those who deserve it must not fail. She refuses to allow such an injustice to happen. Then she raises her spear and reminds them that only 10 people can pass. Their new goal is to gather more than 14 emblems to ensure their spot. Kane smiles and says that he was thinking the same thing. The two rush back to the competition, determined to gather more emblems to qualify for the academy and settle their ridiculous bet. Our hero watches his 2 new allies run away. A faint smile is drawn on his face. He doesn't realize that Director Smith and an examiner are descending from the sky to talk to him. The director approaches our hero and calmly explains that, since his emblem has burned, he is disqualified and will be escorted out. Luz accepts it without arguing. Meanwhile, the bully clenches his fists and mutters that this is not over. He turns to his friend and tells him that he never wants to see Luz's face again. But his friend reminds him that, if Feig and the others manage to defeat enough opponents, then Luz could still find a way to surpass the bully. However, he is too consumed by hatred to think clearly. He starts to imagine that if an examinee died in an accident during the exam, it wouldn't be strange at all, especially if that examinee is a commoner. In that case, no one would care. His friend silently encourages that idea, remembering the terrifying feeling he felt earlier when perceiving our hero's aura. He is convinced that what our hero carries inside is not normal, that there is something dark hidden within him. Later, our hero hands the gathered emblems to the examiner, thinking that his martial arts are certainly strong, but not that powerful. Facing magic, He looks at the academy and reflects on the fact that he really wanted to come here to learn how to fuse martial arts and magic, but right now it seems quite difficult. Later at night he leaves, worried about his clothes, which are torn and dirty, and thinks about how his mother is going to worry about him. He debates whether he should tell her the truth or just lie, when he doesn't realize that a hooded man passes by him. The next second, while Luz is absorbed in his thoughts, the hooded ninja attacks and stabs him in the back. Luz reacts quickly and kicks the attacker away. The ninja asks him how he noticed. Luz can smell blood from afar, especially bloodlust. Suddenly, one ninja is joined by another friend who mocks our hero for being too calm for someone about to die. Our hero realizes that all these opponents seem quite skilled, so he has to give it his all, especially against the one watching from afar, who seems particularly dangerous. Just then, the first ninja pounces to stab our hero, but once again Luz is fast and dodges all the dagger attacks. He disarms the ninja, taking the dagger from his hand and making him fall to the ground. The ninja tries to kick Luz using a technique, but he also misses, and jumps back to reunite with his other friends. He comments on our hero's superhuman perception and advanced combat techniques, pointing out that they match the information he received. This arouses our hero's curiosity to know what information he is referring to, and the ninja admits that our hero's close-quarters combat is truly impressive, even for an apprentice, but that it is no match for magic. With that, the other ninjas form a formation and launch an attack using crossbows and wind magic. Luz is taken by surprise and barely survives, as the arrows pierce the trees behind him. They are the same wind arrows that were used against him before on the battlefield with the bullies. Realizing that the situation is getting serious, he uses a breathing technique that harnesses the ki within his body to increase his physical strength and explosively awaken his latent abilities. Next, he unleashes immense power and speed, rushing at the ninjas. Just as they launch another magical attack, he dodges the arrows so fast that the ninjas cannot see him. Luz is fast, dodging and rolling to get around the attack. Our hero is on a roll, until suddenly a ninja blocks his attack, causing a sharp sting of pain in his hand. That is when he realizes that the ninja he had perceived before is really strong, and even intimidating. He looks around and sees that he is completely surrounded by assassins, and the only thing he can do now is defend himself as best he can. He tries, but in the end some of their magic arrows hit him, which knocks Luz down. The ninjas are relieved that Luz has finally fallen, because even shooting at him has exhausted them. However, they are also surprised that, despite being just a commoner, he proves to be much more troublesome than an average apprentice. One of them approaches him, not realizing that Luz is only pretending to be unconscious. Luz suddenly opens his eyes and unleashes hell, driving his fingers into his windpipe and launching him into the air. The ninja boss cannot believe that Luz uses the old trick of playing dead to lure his enemy, but he is also impressed by such composure in someone so young. Luz then raises the crossbow toward him and asks him why he doesn't care that his apprentices die right in front of him. The boss replies coldly that he doesn't care what happens to the scum. Luz fires the arrows, but the boss defends himself calmly, without the slightest concern. Next, he uses magic to create a gigantic hammer, saying that, if not for the orders of the mysterious person, he would have liked to make Luz his disciple. That said, he launches the giant hammer at Luz. Luz blocks the attack at the last moment, but the ninja manages to launch him into the air. While Luz is still in the air, the ninja boss flies toward him, and once again hits him with his magic hammer, causing him to crash violently into the ground. While attacking, he declares that Luz's skills exceed even those of an apprentice. But at the end of the day, Luz is just a beginner, and is nothing compared to a high-ranking fighter like him. While Luz lies on the ground, the assassin pounces on him, but suddenly senses something is wrong. When the dust settles, he sees that Luz is already in a defensive position. The sight surprises him. Because the boy is still alive, Luz survives thanks to his willpower and mental fortitude. He refuses to die here. The ninja, however, is determined to end his life. He forms a huge rock coffin, an arcane martial art known as the Heavenly Hammer, and launches it at Luz. Terrified, Luz thinks of his family and his precious life. He thinks about how he wants to master magic, protect the people he loves, and change his destiny, no matter the cost. As these thoughts invade him, something changes deep within his being, and his aura begins to transform. That same insane aura that emerged from him before begins to resurface. Instead of defending himself, Luz decides to attack, forcing himself to believe that he will survive. His giant punch collides with the ninja's hammer, surprising the assassin with the brute force behind it. A huge explosion erupts from the impact, and when the smoke clears, Luz is lying on the ground coughing. However, the ninja is not finished. He finds it strange, because now he feels as if he were fighting someone on equal footing. Now that Luz has unleashed his true power, the ninja finally understands why the mysterious person tasked him with killing Luz. Still, he steps forward, approaches Luz, and raises his hammer, preparing to deliver the final blow. However, at the last moment, a lightning tornado strikes, causing the ninja to miss his attack. And he stumbles backward. He finds himself surrounded by the swirling lightning, and he is confused about what is happening until it envelops him, leaving him seriously wounded. Luz watches everything from the ground, bewildered as he sees Director Smith descend from the sky. He is alert but above all shocked. Director Smith, for his part, is delighted to see Luz. Satisfied with having managed to quell his rampage, he hands Luz a magic potion so he can recover his strength, and Luz drinks it elegantly. Finally, after a while, the tornadoes stop tormenting the ninja assassin, and he collapses to the ground. Director Smith approaches him and asks him who has the authority or the audacity to attack one of his academy students. The ninja, surprisingly, shows some respect toward Director Smith, admitting that not even a grandmaster can control a monster like Luz, because this attack is, literally, just the beginning of what awaits Luz in his destiny. Suddenly, the ninja explodes right in front of Director Smith and Luz, and the director cannot comprehend it immediately. He realizes that, given that the ninja died by suicide, it could be the work of the Assassin's Guild. That could have put a price on Luz's head. Still, he hopes he is just overthinking it. Meanwhile, Luz stands up, marveling at the fact that he is completely healed thanks to the advanced healing potion. He is genuinely happy with the results, and observes that even his bones have been completely restored. Next, he asks the director why he always saves him when danger arises. But the director replies that he will answer that question at home. At that moment, Luz suddenly remembers something he had forgotten and panics instantly, apparently. The arrival time has passed, and his mother must be worried. He runs toward his home faster than he has ever fought the bad guys. Meanwhile, Director Smith invokes a snake-shaped magic entity named Skyly. He orders it to clean up the mess and follows Luz. In the city of Mantia, in the north of the Kandria Empire, outside the orphanage, two gangsters are harassing Sister, asking her how much she is really pocketing from the tax money, planning to scam her, and even trying to mock her while she insists that she acts in the best interest of the children. But the gangsters are relentless and have clear evil intentions. Just when one of the men is about to grab Sister, someone kicks him, making him bleed and knocking out his teeth. It turns out that Luz has finally come to save his mother, and Sister is euphoric to see him. But then she notices his torn clothes and is horrified. Before Luz can finish asking her if she is okay, she pounces on him, asking him why his clothes are torn, why there is blood, and why his face is bandaged. Embarrassed, Luz tries to downplay it, saying he got caught on a tree during the exam. But she doesn't believe him. Meanwhile, the gangster who had been knocked unconscious gets back up, turns toward Luz, and accuses him of always breaking the rules, threatening that they will call for reinforcements to face him. Just then, Director Smith arrives to help Luz, explaining that it is all a misunderstanding, and introduces himself. Seeing the director, the gangsters are terrified, realizing that he is a true grandmaster. He quickly asks the gangsters to give his regards to the lord of the land, and both immediately grasp the underlying threat, practically fleeing the place. Director Smith then addresses Sister, saying that he would like to talk about something related to clouds. Sister takes them both inside, and the director notices the strange device that the nobles had just mentioned. The most surprising thing is that it moves automatically without the need for magic. Looking closer, he realizes that there are automatic devices everywhere, from the ceilings to the floors. Even Sister is delighted and says she doesn't understand how Luz did it all. But she is glad, because thanks to him, their lives have become much easier. Next, she comments that, for the director to have come in person, Luz must have done something remarkable during the exam. Director Smith is amused, because on the contrary, Luz exceeded expectations beyond imagination, and he marvels at such talent, which has been seen once before in the scriptures of Gaia. Apparently, when humanity was under the tyrannical yoke of the monsters, only one genius emerged, guided by the goddess. He mastered the essence of the elements and created arcane martial techniques. And 5 years later, along with his companions, he defeated the monsters, saving humanity from mass extinction. The commemorative day of this victory became the basis of their calendar, later called the Day of Liberation, which marks the triumph of humanity. In the scriptures of Gaia, this hero is called the first hero. Sister marvels at the story, thinking of the great hero, while Luz wonders why popular legends make no mention of such a figure. The director clarifies that the hero appears in different forms in other scriptures, described as a man with black hair and eyes. Upon hearing this, Sister falls silent, protective of Luz, and he himself is surprised by her reaction. Director Smith adds that this is a great secret known only to the high spheres of humanity, because, although the hero saved humanity, he also became a victim of the madness that inhabited his heart. He started killing people, committing the unforgivable sin of murdering his own companions. And upon seeing how he fell into madness, he was erased from the history of humanity, and that inner madness became a warning. Upon hearing this, Luz looks at his hands, remembering all the moments when he felt like he was giving in to his own desires. Director Smith stands up, recognizing the gravity of the situation, and explains that in all countries, anyone with black hair and eyes is immediately eliminated to prevent such a threat from arising again. He turns to Luz and asks him if he really thinks he can fool everyone simply by dyeing his hair. Luz's mother, Sister, steps forward, realizing that the discussion revolves around her decision, and admits that it was she who told Luz to dye his hair. She wasn't trying to hide it, but she was afraid that something terrible might happen, and personally guarantees that Luz is a good boy. Luz tells her to calm down, arguing that if the director intended to kill him, he would have already done it. He is here for a reason. Director Smith smiles, impressed that a 13-year-old boy has resisted his inner madness, and has even tamed it, seeing in him the qualities of a new hero. Upon hearing this, Luz cannot help but reflect on the fact that he is considered a new hero. The director explains that, although the world seems peaceful, that is only at a superficial level. A great darkness lurks constantly. Upon observing him in the exam room, he thought that the legends were absurd, and decided to personally guide Luz for the good of humanity. He throws an apple to Luz, who instinctively catches it without difficulty. Director Smith adds that, thanks to the efforts of Feig and Kane, most of the examinees failed the final test, which means Luz passed it. He himself welcomes him to the academy and offers to instruct him under his tutelage. Luz is stunned by the fact that a grandmaster like him places his trust in him, and asks him if he will go crazy like the legendary hero. Before he can finish, the director snatches the apple from his hand and threatens him that, if that happens, he himself will end him too. The next day, Luz is helping to build a fence with his foster brother, who cannot believe that Luz has actually received a personal invitation from Director Smith. He keeps saying it is an incredible honor, but Luz knows there is more behind it. Yesterday's event was partly a warning, although he doesn't say it out loud so as not to worry his brother. His brother won't stop talking about tuition, uniforms, boarding school fees, and all the details of the academy. But Luz cannot stop thinking about the first hero and what connection he might have with that legendary figure, considering that he is nothing more than a simple and noble boy. He remembers how easy it was for the director to catch him, how he discovered the hair dye trick, and how he threatened him. Luz wonders to what extent he can really trust the director's words. The previous night, while walking next to Director Smith after their conversation, Luz had asked him why he let his mother hear everything, knowing that she would worry. The director explained to him that she needed to know the truth. Otherwise, she would just be a burden on his path. Luz is irritated at the word burden, but the director warns him seriously that, when his true identity is revealed, his whole family could be in danger. As a mother, she must understand it and become stronger, letting him face the real tests that are just beginning. Having said this, the director flies away. Luz reflects and realizes that the director is right. He needs to become stronger for the sake of everyone. Soon many children run toward Luz, laughing and happy. A little girl, Lana, hugs him tightly, crying and asking him if he will visit them again. Luz assures her that he will, promising to return regularly and even take some of them home during the long holidays. After all, this is his home. They make a pinky promise, which Luz keeps deep in his heart. Suddenly, someone calls Luz. A noble butler arrives, explaining that he is in the service of the Aranka family, and that young Master Kane wishes to invite Luz to his mansion. He hands Luz the invitation, which looks authentic, stating that Kane wants to strengthen their friendship before classes start. Excited, Luz accepts the invitation and gets into the carriage in the city of Candria. Arsene Empire, Luz finally gets out of the carriage as the butler bows. It is the Aranka family, one of the great distinguished families, and even in the city. Their fame and prosperity are evident. Luz is not prepared for the size of the mansion before him. He is left open-mouthed, realizing that Cain really comes from a great family. When he is about to enter, someone calls him by his name. It is Cain, who runs toward him excited. He almost hugs Luz, telling him they are going to be classmates. Luz congratulates him on having put on a good show in the final exam, and thanks him because he only passed thanks to Feig. And Cain, he says he will let the bet go, since now they are even. However, Cain says that that is a separate matter, and that they should continue with the bet. Besides, Luz already has the ability to pass, and the best part is that he has Feig's approval. Something rare. Upon entering the house, the maids bow to Cain and Luz. Cain explains to them that, since they couldn't really face each other during the exam, he wants them to train together before classes start, so they can get to know each other. He also says that, since Luz wants to ask about the academy and the mathematics beforehand, they can help him with that. Luz likes the idea. But someone interrupts them. It is Cain's mother who is standing on the stairs, clearly angry about who is with her son. Cain tries to protect Luz, saying he is his friend. But before he can explain himself, his mother silences him with a threatening look, and Cain is left speechless. She walks down the stairs hurling insults at Luz, saying that she always advised Cain to choose the right friends, and that the doors of the Aranka family are not for just anyone. A commoner like Luz is not worthy of being Cain's friend. It is an insult to their family. She says that Luz should train to become strong, and not hang out with poor commoners. Cain is beyond embarrassed, as Luz hears the insults directly before he can respond. She approaches Luz and asks him why he has approached her son. She insults him, asking if he wants money or power, and then takes out her ring, saying it is worth a ton of gold coins, and that it could allow him to live comfortably for his whole life. She throws it at his feet disparagingly and tells him to pick it up and go home. Upon seeing this, Cain is ashamed and speaks up, asking her to stop insulting his friend. He apologizes to Luz, but then he sees Luz bend down to pick up the ring. Luz says that he became friends with Cain because he recognized his ability, and that if his mother thinks Cain's ability is worth so little, she should be ashamed of belittling her own son. Cain cannot believe how Luz has turned his mother's words against her, and she becomes enraged, screaming at the servants to throw Luz out of the palace. The servants rush to grab Luz. Cain tries to stop them, arguing that Luz has even more talent than he does. He reminds his mother that Luz broke records in the exam and even surpassed Faye. But his mother does not believe him. She thinks that a commoner surpassing the children of great families is not only unheard of, but impossible. She mocks Cain, asking him if he really expects his ridiculous lies to work on her. Cain insists it is not a lie, and Luz adds that if he is around him, Cain can become even stronger. This enrages Cain's mother, who cannot believe that a mere commoner dares to speak in front of her. Her voice resonates through the great hall, but then the doors open, and a mysterious figure enters the palace. He walks straight to Luz, asking him if he really said that if he is around, Cain would become stronger. Everyone turns to look, and Cain's mother is horrified to see her husband, the lord of the Aranka family, standing there. She stammers, calling him William, and runs toward him, saying they must leave and that Luz will never reach them. But William dodges her and turns to his son, who bows and greets him. Luz greets him politely, realizing that the Grandmaster William has an incredible aura and is on the same level as Director Smith. His father, however, pays no attention to Luz's words. He turns to his son and asks him if Luz's words are true. Cain confirms that Luz's ability surpasses his own. William then decides to challenge Luz, asking him to prove it. He unleashes his crazed aura with intense killing intent, so overwhelming that Luz feels he cannot breathe, and that a lion is staring directly into his soul, tearing him apart. He feels that William is trying to kill him, but at the last moment something miraculous happens. Luz feels as if his whole body were being torn apart, but fortunately, he manages to resist William's willpower with his own aura. His hidden strength surprises everyone. He never expected this level of power from an actual Grandmaster. However, thanks to years of hunting monsters relentlessly, he has developed enough resistance against powerful killing intents. If this is just the beginning, there will undoubtedly be more to come. With that, Luz gathers his aura and releases it from his body with such force that William is slightly surprised. In William's eyes, Luz now looks like a terrifying dragon facing his lion. The lion and the dragon stare at each other until they finally clash. Cain cannot believe the power his friend is demonstrating. In the end, Luz manages to resist the confrontation, but ends up bowing before William. Exhausted, Kane runs to his side and asks him if he is okay. While Luz takes it as a joke, this moment makes William finally look at him with more seriousness. William asks him why he seeks strength. Luz responds sincerely that he wants to protect his family, without saying another word. William turns around to leave. As he walks away, he tells his son that his willpower is weak and that he needs to learn a few things from Luz. Upon hearing this, Kane's mother cannot believe what her husband has just said. She runs after him, asking him to change his mind, but William ignores her completely. Seeing how terrified his mother is before his father, Kane feels a little pity for her, but he pushes that thought out of his mind. He then turns to Luz and tells him they should go to the training ground and start having fun. On the training ground, Kane apologizes for his mother's behavior and for his parents' actions, but Luz brushes it off. He says his father is a bit extreme, because there is not much difference between Luz and Kane, so he shouldn't worry. But Kane tells him that, unfortunately, that is the reality of being the son of such a high-level person. In rank, his father is a meritocrat, and for him to recognize him, he needs to become much stronger. And at this rate, Luz feels more like a son of the Aranka family than he himself does. Luz then tries to argue that William tested his ability for Kane's sake, and that is probably his way of showing love. But that is not enough for Kane. As he looks at the sky extending above him, he thinks about how love has always been different between him and his father. While reflecting on his life, he realizes he has almost never left this house since he was little, because all he did was train, eat, and sleep. His training began when he fought small monsters, even when he was smaller than those monsters. His father wanted him to become a great sage like his grandfather, without him even understanding why he wouldn't stop swinging his sword. Again and again, because he wanted his father to recognize him. But in the end, that place always felt like a prison to him. He would see other children playing happily with paper airplanes while he had to swing swords and fight battles he didn't even understand. Sometimes it seemed to him that even to breathe, he needed permission from the guards. All the adults around him praised him as the young master, but to him, it was as if chains were tightening around his neck. The tighter those chains got, the more he wanted to resist them. He wanted to sing and fly freely like a bird crossing the continent. But unfortunately, that dream perhaps belongs to another life. In this life, he feels too weak to stand up to his father, let alone challenge him. So the only thing he can do for now is fulfill his father's expectations and become stronger by swinging his sword, because that is the only way he believes he will be able to break those chains one day. Besides, his father is also a graduate of the academy he will soon attend. Kane wants to enter the academy to become stronger and finally gain the freedom to live his own life. Upon finishing speaking, he draws his sword and points it at Luz. He tells him that he is counting on him to help him become the best, and Luz accepts the challenge instantly. On the other hand, William watches Kane and Luz fighting from afar and asks his butler about the investigation he had entrusted to him previously. The butler informs him that Luz is definitely not just any boy, since, according to his information, during the exam he used mysterious combat techniques that no one had seen before. Not only did he break previous records, but he was also the one who defeated Feeks without using magic, while Feeks herself had used it. Furthermore, he is held in high regard by the director, who, apparently, even fought the Assassin's Guild last night to protect Luz. Upon hearing this, William recognizes that Luz is not just any person, and that he is quite a troublemaker. It is then that his butler asks him if he already knew this, and wonders why he allowed him to befriend Kane. But William has other plans for his son. He knows that troublemakers attract danger, and that when people face challenges, they overcome them and become stronger. Upon hearing this, he believes that Kane could become stronger thanks to the experiences he will gain by being close to Luz. While he tells this to the butler, Luz is easily defeating Kane in close quarters combat, until Kane finally draws his sword and suggests to Luz that he come at him with all his strength. While watching from a distance, William silently appreciates his son for having a better eye for judging people than he thought. Kane lunges toward Luz using his martial art, the wind thrust technique, and at the last moment, Luz not only defends himself, but also throws a punch so close to Kane's face that he doesn't even realize Luz is already counterattacking. Only when Luz's finger lightly touches Kane's face does he realize what just happened. And Kane comments that accelerating magic with magic is a good technique, but that Luz's movements are a bit linear and too predictable. Kane cannot believe that, despite having used magic, Luz was able to counter it easily. And that is when he realizes why Luz was able to beat Fight. But Luz is lost in his thoughts, and when Kane asks him what is wrong, Luz asks him if he has ever noticed anything strange about his fighting style. Kane says he doesn't remember anything, because his techniques are secret arts passed down through the Aranka family. Both his father and his grandfather mastered them and became strong, but that is not what Luz means. He says there might be another path Kane can take, different from his father's and his grandfather's, and Kane can barely believe what is coming out of his friend's mouth. Luz lowers his sword, takes a dagger from the weapon inventory behind the weapons, and turns to Kane, asking if he wants to surprise his father. At that very moment, William realizes everything, since both Kane and Luz suddenly jump and lunge directly at him the next instant. Without any warning, just a few minutes ago, Luz was giving Kane a little lesson in martial arts, explaining that speed is everything in martial arts, and that the speed of a weapon, in the absolute sense, does not only refer to movement speed, but also to reaction time, and to speed in decision-making. He thinks about how Kane fought during the second entrance exam, and says that his natural speed combines well with his brain attribute support magic, but that thrust techniques are difficult to master, and the fact that his grandfather mastered them does not mean that Kane has to follow the same path. That is why Luz hands him a pair of daggers, explaining that the reason Kane's father stopped improving as the Grandmaster was because he limited his own talent by copying the same style. But Kane does not have to make the same mistake, and to make the most of his talent, he needs to change his fighting style. Luz asks him if he is ready for it, and Kane likes the idea, saying Luz is different from other nobles, and that he will do whatever it takes to be free, even if it means learning new techniques. The two friends start laughing and even share cigarettes, while they talk about their plan to attack Kane's father, and thus demonstrate his skill and determination. And that is how they both ended up lunging at William. Kane uses his wind magic to accelerate, and both lunge toward William. The butler does not understand why William does not react, because William tells him to shut up, just as Kane is about to strike his father. William blocks and dodges the attack calmly. He does the same with Luz. Luz keeps attacking again and again, thinking that daggers are the fastest weapons, and maneuverable, and he wants to make the most of that advantage, combining it with his skill and his butterfly step technique. He tries to beat his opponent's reaction time and release maximum attack power in the shortest time possible. William is slightly surprised to see Luz use the butterfly step, but defends quickly and dodges all attacks. Meanwhile, Kane uses his wind magic to jump into the air again and attacks William from the other side. Kane feels his body is lighter when using the daggers, almost like he is a bird. He not only likes his new weapon, but he loves how the fusion of daggers, combat techniques, and wind magic gives him power and excitement. While fighting, he even goes so far as to say that he has finally found his own path in martial arts, before William thinks it is time for the play to end and releases his aura, causing both Kane and Luz to fly backward. He is very angry because Kane has abandoned the Aranka family technique just to prove his own will, and calls him naive. Kane and Luz quickly regain their balance and prepare to attack again, taking advantage of the wind acceleration in Luz's rapid movements. However, with a single flick of his hand, Kane's father stops the dagger before it can reach him, pushing Kane backward and calling his own son a coward as he lunges at him. Kane remembers Luz's words, that retreating is not a weakness but a strategy in battle. If necessary, he must do it. Kane decides to retreat for a moment before attacking again. After regaining his balance, he lunges once more at his father, just as William is about to grab him. Kane does a somersault over his head, using wind magic like a small tornado, and attacks from behind. At that very moment, Luz approaches again, and they prepare to launch another attack. Kane remembers that only a few minutes before, Luz had taught him a strange technique, but useful, which he had learned from baseball, called speed change, in which a fighter deceives the opponent, using different speeds and sudden variations. With this technique, even the simplest movements can be lethal if used well. If the opponent's reaction is delayed, even for an instant, he can be overwhelmed by maximizing the dagger's force with speed. That is exactly the technique that both boys are using right now, but William is prepared for it. Once again, he blocks Kane's attack, thinking it is an unimportant low blow. But at the last moment, taking advantage of his speed, Kane deceives him, and his weapon ends up just a few centimeters from William. William is shocked by what his son just did. On the other hand, Luz feels proud of his friend and prepares to attack too, when William suddenly announces that the fun is over for today. He turns to Kane, who is sweating, and begins to walk away, telling him not to dishonor the Aranka surname. Kane thinks that is enough, since his father did not reject the idea of him using daggers. While William walks away, the butler follows him. William thinks about how the boys used consecutive short-range strikes with daggers and rapid retreat tactics. The possibility of such a fighting style is quite interesting. For a grandmaster like him, learning something from children is surprising, and deep down, he feels proud of his son, even if he doesn't say it out loud. On the other hand, Luz thinks it was a great opportunity to train with a grandmaster, but he is a little sad that it ended so quickly. Kane, however, is extremely happy because his father has recognized him for the first time. It is the best feeling he has ever had, and he wants to give Luz a gift. He takes Luz to the Aranka family library. Luz is amazed to see the huge number of books. When he turns around, Kane is holding a box and hands it to him, telling him that if it weren't for Luz, he would not have found his way so quickly. When Luz looks inside, he sees gold and various items of great value. There are also rare books on magic that commoners rarely get to read, and studying them will undoubtedly help him. Luz picks up one of the books and reads the title. They are books from the Academy's curriculum, divided by courses. They contain basic magic theory and minor attribute studies, as well as sections on both magic and martial arts. Kane explains to him that all new students must undergo the magic awakening ritual. Luz does not know what it consists of, so Kane tells him it is a ritual where people perceive the elements through the sacred statue of Gaia. He himself underwent the ritual at the church temple, and even members of the great families have to pay 10 gold coins for it. Luz is surprised by such a high price. 10 gold coins are equivalent to several years of living expenses at the orphanage. He quickly asks if he will have to pay for it at the academy, but Kane tells him that the ritual is free there, which is one of the reasons why so many people try to enter the academy. However, there are still other expenses, such as living expenses, books, and rent, which can turn out to be quite expensive. That is why Kane gives him this gift and tells Luz to accept it without hesitation and to count on him whenever he has financial problems. Kane practically puts the box in his hands before Luz can refuse, saying that they should consider it a draw due to their bet. Luz understands what his friend is trying to do and finally accepts. At the same time, Luz realizes that he needs to find a way to earn money. He recently heard that magic pharmacists can earn a lot, and he wonders if there will be any book related to that here. Suddenly, an idea occurs to him. If he can invent things using the knowledge from his previous life, maybe he can earn a lot of money. So he asks if the Aranka family has contacts with the Merchants Guild. Kane tells him yes and asks why he is interested. Luz simply replies that, for now, it is a secret, but that Kane will probably find out very soon anyway. A week later at the academy, the entrance ceremony takes place, and all the first-year students enter on tiptoe. Luz enters happy that the day has finally arrived. As he passes by an attractive senior girl, she notices his scent. He is wearing the latest fashion cologne. Judging by its price, she assumes his parents must be, at the very least, counts. She decides she needs to make contact with him and rushes to approach, introducing herself as Rose, from the class of 150, and offering to show him around. Luz likes the idea and introduces himself. Rose has never heard the surname Grill, but his sonorous and mysterious name catches her attention. She thinks he could be the illegitimate son of a noble. While they walk together, Luz explains to her that, in recent years, since the Emperor's garden has ruled, the imperial heirs have clashed with the nobles and the great families of the academy. At first glance, the academy seems peaceful, but behind the scenes, students fight to obtain educational resources. Normal students can move up in years and pass subjects and obtain credits, but selected students, or those who fail, are expelled. Rose points at Luz and warns him that people are watching him and that he has to do his best. She asks him about his family's support, but Luz does not know what to answer and feels insecure, partly because she is so close. Suddenly, someone pulls his hand away and introduces himself as Brian, congratulating Luz for being the popular class first-year student who broke the entrance exam record. Luz greets him politely. Rose realizes that she has wasted time on a commoner despite having smelled the expensive cologne. Luz pays her no more attention than necessary and turns to Brian, who tells him to ignore her. He explains that the academy is a miniature version of the Empire, with all kinds of people. Kane calls Luz, but Brian leaves with other students and tells Luz to call him if he needs anything. Luz does not understand why. Brian leaves just as Kane arrives. Kane explains that Brian is the rector's son, and not someone with whom he has a close relationship. Faye interrupts, calling Brian a decent boy but weak-willed. Upon seeing Faye, Kane becomes defensive and they start arguing, while Miliana's sweet friend Faye tries to take her away to finish the registration. Luz thanks Faye for supporting him during the entrance exam, but she insists that he achieved it on his own, and continues to mock Kane. While Miliana drags her along, Kane turns to Luz and shows him a huge pile of coins, explaining that it is his share of the money. Luz cannot believe he has earned so many gold coins, and Kane says that everything comes from following his instructions in the Berna Village commercial company. Previously, they had gone to sell perfume, which was Luz's secret. Luz explains that it is a new type of perfume that he has created with a subtle scent that distinguishes it from the usual ones. Kane likes the scent, but worries if it will make money. Luz trusts his product. His trust proves correct, as they are obtaining huge profits. Much beyond what Kane expected, Kane mentions that he will give part of the money to his mother, and wonders what is going through Luz's head. Curious to know what motivates him, they walk to the reception and Luz asks Kane to keep this matter a secret, and Kane agrees. Shortly after, a professor gives Luz his credit card, reminding him not to lose it, and wishing him the best. At registration, Luz hears people whispering about him, calling him shameless and criticizing the school for allowing commoners to mix in. They talk about how he beat Faye and Sane, and how the director expelled other students because of him. Luz realizes that Sid was expelled, and Kane explains that Sid had hired the Assassins Guild, and that, once the school found out, he was expelled. Immediately, Luz finally understands that Sid was after him from the beginning. Kane adds that Sid has an older brother named Jess, whose actions are unpredictable, so Luz must stay close. Luz makes eye contact with Jess, but feels neither worry nor anger, while Jess is excited to know that the real fun is about to begin, and plans to make Luz the worst student in the Academy's history. In the Academy's Great Hall, all the new students gather while the director welcomes them, telling them that they must be proud of having overcome many difficulties and having managed to enter the Academy. But the truth is that this is just the beginning of their lives, and they must continue studying hard and aspire to become truly powerful. Someday, many of them will find their own path and become pillars of the empire. Next, he announces that the entrance exam speech will be given by the representative of the first-year students, Neil Gunn, and asks him to come up to the stage. Neil goes up with confidence, surprising all the students who feel disgusted, but also intrigued because he obtained the first place in the exam. His killing intent is excessive, but he is not wearing anything at all. The examiners are horrified and want to stop him, but the director intervenes. Neil addresses the first-year students, calling them idiots, and says that his goal is to beat every single one of them until they all die. The students are enraged, thinking that he is arrogant, believing that first place does not give him the right to treat them that way. Neil tells them to shut up, and everyone remains silent, knowing that they are weak. Seeing how problematic Neil is, the examiners worry about his future, and about how they are going to teach a child like that, even considering quitting. Neil then throws his hammer from the stage at someone, declaring that his real opponent is him. When the hammer lands in front of Luz, Neil jumps on him like a crazed master, saying that they are going to fight a legendary battle. Kane intervenes immediately, protective and panicked, placing himself between Neil and Luz, and reminds Neil that the entrance exam is still in progress and that he must behave and stay away from his friend. Neil mocks Kane, ridiculing him for being afraid and comparing him to other nobles, calling them all weak and pale. Kane is furious, with anger rising as he prepares to throw a punch, but Luz intervenes, stopping him and encouraging him to calm down. Neil then calls them both cowards and claims that he does not mind facing them, clearly provoking them. Brian arrives, trying to mediate, pointing out that he is one of the most talented commoners, and urging Kane and Luz to get along for their own good, and warns them that selfishness will make it impossible to survive at the Academy. Neil ignores him, telling him to get lost and downplaying it. Brian feels embarrassed. Kane is amused, and Luz is confused about why Brian puts up with Neil and defends him. Around them, students gossip, surprised that a commoner like Brian is treated so rudely. Kane smiles at the embarrassment. Neil takes the bait and threatens to split Brian's head, but the teacher stops him, reminding him that fights between students are prohibited, except during supervised classes, official exams, or tournaments, and that any infraction carries immediate expulsion. Neil's attitude changes. He feels a little embarrassed realizing that no one wants to get expelled from a serious university. He backs down and postpones the fight for now. Although the tension between him and Luz persists, the teacher ends the welcome ceremony, announcing that students have the rest of the day off and that classes start tomorrow. Luz does not understand why Neil has suddenly focused on him, and Kane tries to blame Faye. Dragging her into the argument, Faye resists hitting Kane and points out that his near expulsion was partly his fault, since he faced Neil during the final exam. The fight ended in a draw, although rumors claim that Neil lost to Luz, which fueled his desire for revenge. Faye feels relieved that Luz is safe and that the fight went well, while Luz assures her that there is no problem. They get along very well, but then Kane takes Luz away, warning him that everyone is watching them. And indeed, the students stare at them, making it clear that they are already very unpopular. Later, Kane and Luz go to the academy store, and Luz is surprised by the prices of everything, since they are very expensive. The shop assistant says it is not that bad, pointing out that a fluffy feather pillow only costs 30 silver coins. But even that seems too expensive to him. She shows him even more expensive pillows, and Luz slaps his forehead, incredulous at how expensive everything is. Kane tells him that it is still among the cheapest, because he will need basic necessities, so he should treat himself from time to time. Luz immediately realizes the power of money and credits. In secret, he uses some savings to buy the cheapest New Life starter kit for 100 silver coins. And the girl accepts. He is happy and relieved to have earned money with the perfume from before, because otherwise he would have been lost. And now he plans to send the rest of the money to the orphanage. He looks at the magic potions, essential for cleaning, and thinks about looking for more ways to earn money. For now, he sees Faye and Miliana walking, talking about going to the dormitory, with Faye asking Miliana about her magic awakening ritual tomorrow. Luz looks at the bags they carry in front and in their hands, realizing how much money they have spent on their packages, and thinks about how hard his family has to work at the residence. He looks for room 60, hoping not to have to share it with a bully, when he realizes that someone is blocking his path by throwing a futon right in front of him. He looks inside the room and sees a group of boys bullying a first-year student, telling him that he had better do what they ask. They corner the boy, who looks bored and indifferent, even when one of the bullies grabs him. However, someone taps the bully's hand, sending an electric shock down his arm. Luz warns him that doors are prohibited and asks him if he is okay with being expelled. All the bullies turn to him, insisting that they have done nothing wrong, except that he threw the first punch. One of them lunges at Luz, but he pulls his hand away sharply, causing the bully's arm to hit a friend so hard that it knocks him to the ground. Luz smiles mockingly, insisting that he hasn't hit anyone, while the hit boy cries. Asking why his friend hit him, but the friend has no answer, Luz kicks, causing another boy's leg to shake involuntarily, hitting a crouching friend who writhes in pain. The bully is bewildered. Luz punches the first boy in the chest and pushes him back against another friend. The bully still doesn't understand it and starts to blame Luz. But Luz smiles mockingly, saying that he hasn't done anything and that the boys have only hurt each other. The bully claims that Luz controlled their bodies, calling him a monster, something Luz hated. He heads towards him with an arrogant air, but the bullied boy intervenes, asking Luz to leave the matter alone. Luz then threatens all the boys before dismissing them, declaring that they are free to leave. The bullies flee, muttering weak threats to Luz. Afterwards, Luz helps the first-year student pick up his belongings and notices the name, Kara Candice, on the bedding. He tries to start a casual conversation, but Kara disappears, showing extreme shyness. Clearly, the type of person who gets bullied. Luz looks around and realizes everything that has happened on his first day, hoping that nothing crazy happens in tomorrow's ritual. Meanwhile, a few men disrupt the Great Hall, acting like thorns in Luz's path. The next day, in the Great Hall, all the students and the first-year students gather for the ceremony. Luz arrives with his roommate, Kara, who continues to refuse to talk to him and does not say a single word. Luz looks at the gigantic statue that stands in the middle of the hall, the statue of the goddess of this world. A priest stands at the feet of the statue, calling everyone's attention and introducing them to the goddess Gaia. Next, he begins to relate the long history. Long ago, the goddess Gaia created a world in which humans and monsters could coexist. But after a while, the monsters started to use their overwhelming natural power against humans. Soon dragons dominated the sky, behemoths dominated the land, and krakens dominated the sea. Due to the brutal power struggles between these powerful monsters, the earth was covered in blood. Many humans were annihilated during this time at the hands of these monsters. Upon seeing what her world had become, the goddess Gaia was enraged. As a result, she granted her blessing to humans who lacked magic power. Thanks to this blessing, humanity began to understand the essence of the four elements of the world: water, earth, wind, and fire. From that understanding, they created martial arts. After many years and centuries of hard battles, humans finally escaped annihilation and became the new rulers of the world. Now, the students who are in the hall are the descendants of those great ancestors who received the blessing and awakened the true nature of the world, the power of magic. Luz listens carefully, but realizes that the first hero the director spoke about earlier has not yet been mentioned. At the same time, Kyra observes something in Luz, although he says nothing. As always, just at that moment, the priest approaches them and signals them to head to their seats. The boys are confused, but follow his instructions. The priest explains to them that if they possess talent for magic, they will be able to perceive the elements. But if they are weak and cannot feel anything, then the academy is no place for them. While saying this, the priest turns towards Luz, and Luz feels a hint of tension coming from him. The priest dismisses everyone, announcing that the ritual is about to begin and that all students must take their seats. Luz remains distracted by the strange look the priest gave him earlier and wonders if he might have offended him in some way. The priest begins the ritual by announcing the four elements once again and instructs the students to sharpen their minds and connect with everything they can perceive, explaining that the goddess will help them discover the element hidden inside them. He performs a spell, and the symbols of the four elements appear in the four corners of the room, shining brightly and releasing waves of energy that glow from the statues, and almost blinding the students. Suddenly, a divine figure forms above them, an even larger image of the goddess Gaia. When the students look up, they feel as if they are floating in the universe surrounded by magical orbs. And colorful, the scene is impressive. One by one, the students are chosen by different elements. Some feel happy with their results, while others feel disappointed. Suddenly, several students gasp for air as a powerful tornado forms around one of the first-year students. This means that two attributes have awakened in a single person. When everyone looks closer, they are surprised to see that the student is the commoner Neo. They cannot believe how easy it is for him to channel magic power and begin to wonder if he is really a genius. Neil feels euphoric after being chosen by two elements, fire and earth. He proudly boasts of his power and threatens the others, demanding that they obey him. After boasting about his abilities, he looks back and notices that Luz is still sitting in silence. Meditating, Neo thinks that someone who cannot even awaken an element should not be considered his rival. However, he secretly hopes that Luz succeeds. Everyone also looks at Luz, but to their surprise, there are no elemental energies gathered around him at all. They begin to murmur because they expected something unusual from him. Luz gets frustrated because he cannot feel anything. He wonders if it is because he is not from this world. He feels as if a thick, black darkness surrounds him. However, he knows that cannot be true, because when he faced Cain earlier, he vaguely perceived a strange power when Cain used magic. Now he feels as if his mind is drowning, as if something murky is blocking his vision. Luz gets angry and refuses to let this strange barrier break his will so easily. His determination skyrockets, and the strength of his will releases energy that pushes the dark cloud away from him. When he opens his eyes again, he finally sees the colorful elements surrounding him. Meanwhile, the priest watching from afar cannot believe that the magic circle he placed there to isolate Luz's mind from the outside has been broken. He wonders how Luz managed to do it. Luz reaches out towards the water element, but it suddenly moves away from him. He can feel the elements, but he cannot touch them, which confuses him even more. He keeps trying to reach the water element and gets more frustrated with each attempt. This is another trap set by the priest. In secret, he placed a confinement circle, a magic spell designed to block the flow between the spirit and the element, along with forbidden magic minerals, objects that weaken the bond between a person and the elements. The priest planned that, even if Luz could see the elements, he would never be able to interact with them. Apparently, there are people around Luz who are determined to crush him at any cost. The priest blames Luz for having made so many enemies so soon, since he has offended them. One of those enemies approaches the priest with a small gift to sabotage Luz. The priest accepts it, and now hopes that Luz will fall into despair before the ritual ends. After a while, students begin to leave the room because their rituals are over. They talk and gossip about Luz, saying that he was just acting tough before, but that he cannot even awaken a simple element. and that he must be a weakling. At that moment, Kara notices something and points at Luz. Then towards the floor, he speaks his first words, warning that there is a trap set there. When Luz looks down, he realizes that Kara is right. He strikes the carpet and destroys it, exposing a hidden orb underneath. Kara turns around and leaves, telling him to hurry up. Luz smiles at her, but feels confused about why someone would do this, and if it was just a coincidence. When he looks at the priest, he starts to think that maybe it is not a coincidence. After all, even so, he puts that thought aside, because now the decisive moment begins. Luz stands up and lets the elements perceive him. Suddenly, the orbs surrounding the students rush towards Luz and form a vortex similar to the one Neo created earlier. The students cannot understand what is happening with these commoners, or why they are becoming so powerful. The priest is dismayed, wondering how Luz has awakened this power, and has eluded the curse, because not even a master should be able to break the confinement circle and the forbidden magic orbs. Suddenly, someone puts a hand on his shoulder. When he turns around, he sees the director looking at him with anger and ordering him to retire and leave. The priest has no choice but to obey, while the students gather and whisper about why the director is there. Some believe he has come to check on the commoner boy who could not awaken any element, while others suspect there is some secret connection between the director and Luz. No one knows for sure. Meanwhile, the priest is furious and wonders why the director had to show up and ruin his plan. With no other option, he leaves the great hall. Outside, he finds Jess waiting for him. The priest informs him that his plan has failed and warns him that they must stay away from each other for a while. Jess agrees and says he will take care of the rest himself. Although angry, Jess remains determined to crush Luz. Whatever happens inside the hall, the director quietly orders his confidant, Kylie, to watch the priest, because he cannot allow outsiders to the academy to cause trouble. Now that the obstacles have disappeared, the director focuses all his attention on Luz, who remains in deep meditation while awakening multiple elements. Luz seems lost in another world, and in reality he is, because in his mind he is amazed by the countless elements surrounding him. A few days before, at Khan's house, they had talked about the nature of the elements. Khan explained that the elements are the foundations of the world created by the goddess. Luz was confused because monsters can use magic from birth, so he asked why humans must awaken the elements first. Khan explained that monsters possess magic crystals inside their bodies. He even showed one to Luz and told him that these crystals contain different elemental powers, which gives monsters a natural affinity for magic from birth. Humans, however, must perform an awakening ritual. Only after being recognized by an element can they use magic, and they must manipulate the surrounding elements to cast spells during the ritual. Elements with good compatibility approach a person, and once recognized, all that remains is to train the mind and body. Luz looked at the crystal and thought about how it seemed like a condensed form of the elements themselves. Kane explained that the entire world is composed of elements, but that humans simply cannot see them. Luz now remembered that conversation and hypothesized that the water element floating before him could be the most suitable one for him. Upon touching it, he suddenly feels everything at once, from the calm currents of the sirens and sea sirens to the terrifying forces of the krakens. The immense energy runs through his body, causing him overwhelming pain. It is as if the very essence of the world were manifesting through the will of the goddess. Luz feels as if he is drowning in the power of the elements. The sensation becomes unbearable for him. Seeing Luz struggle so violently, the director realizes that the situation is dangerous. He quickly creates a divine barrier around the entire room, forming a protective shield. Gaia reinforces the shield, and the four corners, which represent the elements, form a cage-like barrier around Luz. While he struggles in the middle of the storm of power, the students trapped inside cannot see anything due to the blinding light, but they feel the overwhelming energy emanating from Luz. They are scared and confused, especially because the director has locked the boy inside the barrier. The director holds the shield and shouts at Luz to calm down and not let himself be carried away by the chaos surrounding him. Luz hears the voice and quickly recomposes himself. In a matter of seconds, the furious vortex begins to calm down. He wipes a tear from his face and realizes that he was on the verge of losing control of his mind. When he studies the elements more closely, he notices something familiar. They resemble the elemental particles of the world in which he once lived. If they truly behave like particles, then manipulating their frequency could produce incredible results. As soon as this thought occurs to him, one of the particles explodes, and the surrounding elements begin to spin around him again. The director had never witnessed anything like it. A huge rainbow-colored tornado rises before him. The students tremble at the sight of such a terrifying power, and even the director realizes that the event has far exceeded his expectations. Meanwhile, Luz remains in the center of the vortex, studying the elements as if they were part of a scientific experiment. He begins to believe that humans could use magic with the same ease as monsters. If they learn to control these frequencies, the elements flow slowly into his bloodstream. Luz thinks about how the elemental particles are always in motion, synchronizing that movement with his breathing. And the flow of Luz, the circulation of the elements, inside the body becomes more fluid. If this balance continues, he might even be able to form a magic crystal inside himself and use higher-level magic techniques. Suddenly, the remaining elements rush towards his head and are absorbed by his brain. When Luz opens his eyes again, they glow with a snowflake pattern. At the same time, sharp icicles begin to form around his body. They pierce the barrier and explode all over the great hall. Luz rises into the air, while the elemental power runs through his body. Students run in panic as the spreading ice freezes everything in its path. The director observes the frozen students and realizes that the situation is becoming serious. But first he needs to stifle the power. He pulls a golden shield from his cloak and prays to the goddess to grant the academy the power of flames. He raises the shield to the sky, making it shine brightly, and then summons a barrier of flames, which spreads throughout the university. The flames reach Luz, and upon touching him, the ice forming around his body begins to fade slowly. A bright light erupts from the great hall and spreads throughout the academy, visible even from distant areas. People all over campus notice the sudden glow and are puzzled, wondering what is happening inside the great hall. Luz finally lands back on the ground, while the director looks at him and wonders what element could create something that resembles ice. Meanwhile, Luz remains in deep meditation. In his mind, he observes the elemental particles resting in his hand, moving at an incredible speed. Little by little, they begin to fuse. Luz performs quick mental calculations and realizes that, depending on the combinations of the four elements, totally new reactions can occur, creating something different. At that moment, the wind and water elements inside him begin to mix. However, he has no idea what to do with this discovery. At this moment, he feels he needs someone's guidance. As his confusion grows, Luz realizes that he needs to wake up. When he finally opens his eyes, he sees the director standing next to him. He takes a look around and realizes the protective shield of flames that surrounds them. The director lowers his hand and removes the barrier, and then calmly asks Luz if he understands what he just did. Luz looks at the students, who are almost paralyzed, and begins to realize how serious the situation has become. Luz feels embarrassed and laughs nervously. He says he has made a bit of a mess, and that the director has saved him. The director then turns to his confidant, Kylie, and tells her that he will take Luz to his office while she takes care of fixing the mess. He asks Luz to follow him, and tells him that he can ask him any question he wants along the way. While they return to the director's office, the statue of Gaia that is there seems to look at Luz with severity. The director first congratulates him for having awakened all the elements. While Luz drinks a potion to calm his mind because he is exhausted, Luz nods, and then shows the elements emerging from his hands. The director is very impressed. Handling the elements with such ease, being a novice apprentice, is something extraordinary, and he finds it hard to believe that Luz has just awakened his talent. It is truly surprising. Next, the director gives him a book that will help him study magic, and asks him to read it carefully for reference. He explains that he mainly uses earth and wind magic. So for fire and water, Luz should ask Feig and Miliana if he has any questions. Since both come from great families, they know many secrets and techniques. Next, the director calls his apprentice, Kyrie, to enter the room. When she enters, the magic snake transforms into an attractive woman. The director introduces them to each other and explains that, from now on, Kylie will be in charge of protecting Luz. After that, Kylie suggests that they go to another place where they can speak more freely. She takes them both to an abandoned building. Luz asks why they are in that place, and the director explains that it is where he trains and meditates. He has reinforced the area with earth magic to make it resistant and soundproof. Kylie then asks Luz to show her the elements. Luz shows how he awakened the ice element by chance during his ritual. He explains that by accelerating the movement of two elements and mixing them, a new element is born, and he has called it the ice element. The director points out that he had never heard of mixing elements. Kylie is astonished, just as the director said. She is attracted by the icy effect and smiles. The next instant, she lunges at Luz, asking to feel the ice element herself. She throws a flurry of punches, but Luz defends himself easily using his magic, and even lands a punch on her, which forces her to retreat. She realizes that the fusion of two elements is extraordinary. Turning to the director, she asks if such a fusion has ever been carried out. The director explains to her that it has never been done. Since magic appeared, many people have studied its power, and countless geniuses have dedicated their lives to mastering it, but no one has managed to fuse elements. Most people only control a single attribute, and very few can manipulate several. Even the most powerful saint in the empire, Lady Miriam, a genius who only appears once every century, could control 3 elements but failed when trying to fuse 2, which led her mind and her body to the brink of madness. Luz realizes that normal humans cannot perform element fusion. The principle explains that humans must withstand the power of the elements inside their body. And their mind, accelerating the elements, as Luz did, requires immense willpower to guide them and release them safely. Only by controlling several elements at once can they collide to form something new. But it can be lethal. Kylie realizes that Luz's power could rival that of a saint, even though he himself does not yet understand it. Kylie decides to put Luz through a full-fledged test and invokes her fire element, and starts another duel with him. They face off while director Smith explains how Lady Miriam theorized back in the day that handling multiple elements simultaneously required a body similar to that of a dragon, capable of withstanding elemental collisions, or the use of magic crystals like monsters do. Luz asks about the results of that research, and the director responds that they were disastrous. All experiments in the empire failed, and the concept ended up being considered forbidden and illegal. He never imagined that someone could break such a taboo, and witnessing it now surprises him deeply. Luz realizes that by calculating multiple elements via separate paths, he prevented them from colliding inside him. Kylie warns him not to get too confident, reminding him of the risks. Luz understands what is at stake. It could cause problems, as happened in his previous life, but he has no intention of losing control. Kylie tells him that if his secret were to come to light, there is no telling what could happen. The director has tasked her with protecting him, but she does not like unnecessary trouble, so she asks Luz to be careful. Luz accepts and confirms that the ice element is an application of the water attribute that he evoked. The director asks him what he means by application, and Luz explains that his willpower, stronger than normal, allows him to turn water into ice under pressure. While he speaks, he asks Kylie to attack again. When she lunges, Luz demonstrates simultaneously using his water magic. Under extreme pressure, the water transforms into ice, forming an ice shield in front of him. Kylie is baffled, and director Smith is amazed by the transformation. Luz calls it water element, superionic ice form. Kylie asks him how he turned regular water into ice that resists even her flames and radiates heat. Luz explains that liquids change form under intense pressure, and that he simply applied that knowledge he had in his mind. The director turns to Luz and tells him that there are still many things unexplained in the world. He invites Luz to come see him whenever he wants and promises to personally teach him how to use his powers properly. He even offers to give him credit for any new discovery Luz makes. Luz is delighted with the idea. Kylie, for her part, seems nervous and asks if the director is really going to protect Luz, since what just happened has never been recorded or written in books, and it could have been a coincidence. The director explains that some of the magic that appears in books is, in itself, the result of coincidence, and that he does not want to rule out any possibility. Kylie listens carefully and accepts her boss's orders. She knows that our hero will be a very demanding student and that a lot of work awaits her, but she commits to doing it anyway. She vanishes to attend to her other obligations. The director then offers our hero a mental recovery potion, telling him that it will restore his energy for a while, but warning him not to abuse it. Since classes start tomorrow, he should go back and rest. Our hero drinks the potion, amazed that there are also magic potions for the mind. Luz returns to his dormitory, still wide awake from the potion, and decides that he might as well meditate until the next morning. Upon entering, he notices that Kara is still awake and asks her what she is doing, and if she has been waiting for him. Our hero appreciates it and thanks her personally, knowing that Kara really saved him today. The director had told him about a rare artifact in the hallway and asked how our hero had noticed it. But Kara does not answer and simply hands our hero a card from the Gandis Trading Company. Luz now realizes why Kara knows so much. Kara then leaves in silence, muttering a thank you before closing the door. Our hero understands that Kara was just returning the favor for saving her on the first day, and for being the child of a merchant. It is also a good way to make contacts. The next morning, in the Kandria Arcanist training room, students gather as their new physical training instructor is introduced. Derek is there to teach the fundamentals of martial arts, but gives the impression of being gross and creepy. Most students, both boys and girls, feel intimidated or disgusted. Even Kane thinks the teacher is weird, but our hero notices his exceptionally toned body. Eager to learn to train both the body and the mind, Derek immediately notices our hero and gets behind him with incredible speed. Luz perceives him instantly, while Kane feels intimidated. Derek leans toward him, praising our hero for his top-class physique and expressing his desire to train him more. Our hero feels both disgusted and cautious. Then Derek turns to Kane, mocking his lack of muscle and calling him weakling Blondie. Kane gets annoyed, but Derek keeps going. The class begins following the academy tradition, with senior students giving a demonstration of the training equipment. Some seniors, including Jess, walk in commenting on how unreliable the first years are, and how even the great families have become shameful. They walk in proudly, acting as if they own the hall. Kane and our hero are a bit annoyed. When Derek asks them to demonstrate their strength, a senior student approaches the PEC platform with weights that trains both arms and chest and lifts the weight effortlessly. Each weight is powered by magic, and he handles a ton with ease. The students are stunned to realize that they could never do it. Another senior student spins at incredible speed, while another runs on a treadmill with 250-kilo weights strapped to both legs. Derog then tells the first years to try it, warning them not to give up. The first years struggle with each exercise, as they clearly lack athletic aptitude. The seniors mock them until they stop, but then they notice someone mastering the machines. It is our hero, who trains as if it were a game. He lifts 10 tons with ease. He runs on the treadmill so fast it looks like he is going to explode, and he spins so violently he looks like a tornado. The students are stunned, convinced that it is impossible, and suspect he might be taking performance-enhancing drugs. On the other hand, Neil is in his own league. Neil, however, plays in another league. He lifts 15 tons of weight, as if it meant absolutely nothing. He puts on a 20-ton block and runs on the treadmill as if he were taking a quiet walk in the park. The other students can only watch in horror as they see him train like a monster in human form. Once he finishes his set, he drops the huge weight right in front of Luz with a deafening thud, leaving his intentions painfully clear in Neo's mind. This proves that he wins simply because he is stronger than everyone else. He looks directly at Luz and tells him to forget about everyone around them, so the two of them can settle the tension between them once and for all. The problem is that Luz does not even see this as a rivalry. All he sees is Neil's oversized ego and his desperate need to prove that he is the strongest student in the academy. Ironically, that thought alone irritates Luz even more. He rubs his forehead, exhausted, already tired of all the assumptions Neil makes about him. It is only his first day at the academy, and the only thing they are doing right now is basic physical training. The goal is simply to strengthen their bodies and build endurance. Nothing more than that. Luz tells Neil that showing off his strength in front of everyone is useless and childish before the conversation can end. Jess is suddenly offended by the comment, even though Luz is not even talking to him. Jess immediately assumes the comment is directed at him, and his expression darkens with anger. He warns Luz not to get too arrogant just because he thinks he is a bit stronger than the others. According to Jess, physical strength means very little in the long run, because true power comes from attributes. That immediately grabs Luz's attention, and he asks what exactly attributes are. Neil responds with total confidence and declares proudly that he possesses the dual attributes of fire and earth. The moment those words leave his mouth, Jess is genuinely stunned. It is almost unheard of for a commoner to awaken with both fire and earth attributes, and even he realizes how extraordinary that combination is. Neil then turns the question to Luz and asks him what attribute he possesses. Luz responds calmly that he has a water attribute. As soon as Jess hears that answer, he bursts into laughter. Out of all possible attributes, Luz ends up having water. For Jess, that sounds completely pathetic. He openly mocks Luz and asks him, "What is someone with the water attribute supposed to do in a fight? Are you going to splash your enemies with puddles and wait for them to slip?" Luz just looks at him confused, unable to understand why water is considered so ridiculous. That is when Miliana finally explains the situation to him. She tells Luz that the water attribute, the arcane martial arc, is considered extremely basic compared to the other elemental paths. Its most common offensive skill is Water Blade, a technique that leans much more toward defense and support than toward pure destruction. That is why people tend to look down on water users and see them as weaker than fighters who possess much more aggressive attributes. And destructive. Luz remains silent for a moment while he processes everything he has just heard so far. He had never realized that the water attribute was looked down upon to such a degree. Jess continues increasing the humiliation and tells him that, no matter how strong his body is, the moment someone awakens a water attribute, their future becomes completely hopeless. The group of bullies surrounding him bursts into laughter at those words. One of them adds smugly that, throughout history, not a single user of the water attribute has ever reached the rank of Grandmaster. For that reason, they mockingly advise Luz to accept his place and become nothing more than support for those who possess superior attributes. According to them, the best thing he can do is stand behind stronger fighters and help them win battles. Luz immediately dislikes the tone they are using. He narrows his eyes and asks if they are really saying that someone who only possesses the water attribute will never be able to surpass the master level, not even under ideal circumstances. Jess responds as if the answer were obvious and tells him that it is simply common sense. He mocks Luz and tells him that a commoner clearly knows nothing about the world, so someone has to explain the reality to him first. At that moment, Kane finally loses his patience and responds harshly. Fa also intervenes and demands that the bullies stop talking, because it is clear they have no idea what they are doing. The tension between both groups increases immediately, and the argument gets louder with each passing second. Jess suddenly turns toward the teacher and reminds him that senior students must act as role models for the newcomers. Next, he proposes a new exercise. He explains that controlling magic properly requires not only mana control, but also a powerful body capable of withstanding punishment. According to him, endurance training is the perfect way to strengthen both physical fortitude and mana control, since receiving direct hits forces the body to adapt under pressure. With a satisfied smile on his face, Jess suggests a friendly match that can also serve as endurance training. He proudly declares that he will personally demonstrate to the new students how useless the water attribute really is. At that moment, Kane leans quickly toward Luz and warns him of something important. He reveals to him that Jess is, in reality, the older brother of the student that Luz humiliated earlier. He also explains that water attributes are notoriously weak when it comes to reinforcing and protecting the body. In other words, Jess clearly intends to beat Luz up in front of everyone. Even after hearing the warning, Luz barely pays attention to Kane's concern. Instead, he turns to the teacher and states calmly that he believes there is no such thing as a superior attribute or inferior one. The teacher immediately interprets those words as Luz accepting the challenge, and Luz confirms it without hesitation, declaring that he will fight the senior students himself and prove that their beliefs are wrong. Meanwhile, the senior students wait anxiously for the fight to begin. Kane tries one last time to convince Luz to reconsider his decision, but Luz simply tells him that everything will be fine. Next, the teacher announces the combat rules. He states that magic can only be used within the central arena and says he hopes everyone trusts in the strength of the bodies they have worked so hard to develop. He also makes it clear that it is strictly forbidden to dodge attacks during combat. All participants must stand firm and withstand the blows they receive. While Jess and Luz prepare, a sudden explosion of flames erupts near them. Neil lunges forward, surrounded by fire. While he laughs like a total maniac, he shouts that his moment has finally arrived and declares that now he will finally be able to enjoy a proper fight. The senior students are immediately irritated by his interruption. One of them steps forward with an angry expression and announces that he himself will teach Neil how to speak with respect to his elders. The senior student activates his earth attribute and forms thick armor around his body, before lunging forward at a terrifying speed. His attack seems brutal enough to kill someone in a single hit. However, before he can even reach his target, a fist hits him directly in the face with monstrous force. The impact completely shatters his defense and sends him flying across the arena. Everyone watches in awe as Neil moves forward naturally after landing the blow. Jess and the other seniors are paralyzed. In disbelief, the student who receives the punch can barely understand what just happened. His Earth armor is famous for being one of the most resistant defensive abilities that exist, and yet Neil destroys it with a single blow. Furious and humiliated, Jess immediately orders the rest of the senior students to attack Neil together and take him down by force. The senior students lunge at Neil all at once. Of course, Neil seems excited instead of worried. He dramatically rips off his shirt and reveals his perfectly sculpted body, as if he were showing off to a crowd. Then he smiles wildly and throws himself directly into the battle. The attacks they launch at him barely seem to affect him, while the blows seem harmless to Neil. Every blow he returns is devastating. He grabs one of the senior students and throws him far away, with enough force to make him crash into several others who are behind him. For a brief moment, Neil's back is completely exposed. One of the Earth Attribute veterans sees the opportunity and lunges forward, convinced that he has finally found Neil's weak point. He attacks with all his might, but the instant his blow lands, his confidence vanishes. Instead of hurting Neil, he ends up shattering his own armor. A fraction of a second later, once the adrenaline fades, unbearable pain runs through his body, and he lets out a scream that resonates through the body. Throughout the arena, the horrified senior student finally realizes what has happened. Neil concentrates his mana on a single point of his body to strengthen it to an absurd degree. The senior student cannot understand how a first-year student already possesses such terrifying control over mana. Before he can recover, Neil gives him a violent kick that launches him across the arena and throws him against a wall. The professor observes the whole scene with total boredom on his face. In a calm voice, he reminds everyone that, even if they become powerful fighters, they must never neglect the fundamentals, unless they want to end up exactly like the defeated senior student lying on the ground. Luz observes the carnage with growing fear. Even he has to admit that Neil is giving him a gruesome beating. He quietly asks Kane if he thinks Neil has gone too far. Before Kane can respond, another attack suddenly comes from behind them. Kane notices the danger instantly, just as Feig and Luz see another veteran approaching from the front. Without hesitating, both Kane and Feig step forward to protect Luz. At the same time, they also want to prove to the veterans that the newbies are not weak prey waiting to be crushed. As Luz stands between his two friends, he slowly looks up at Jess. Their gazes cross across the arena. Luz then speaks calmly and tells him that the time for his main event has finally arrived. Jess mocks Luz and tells him that he holds himself in too high regard if he really believes he is the main event. Calling him arrogant, ignorant, and completely oblivious to his place, Jess proudly declares that he is the heir of the Harry family, a noble house with prestige and influence under the banner of his family name. He claims that he himself will teach a low-born nobody like Luz how things are. To Jess, true noble dignity and pride, honor and manners are things that only nobles can truly possess. As soon as he finishes speaking, Jess launches into the air and lunges at Luz at incredible speed. He unleashes gelatin attrition and aims directly at Luz with lethal force. However, just when the attack is about to impact, Luz instantly creates an ice shield over himself. Jess is completely stunned by what happens next. The shield is not only strong enough to block his attack without cracking, but the freezing energy emanating from it is so intense that it forces him to retreat immediately. Jess stares at his own hands in disbelief and realizes that they are freezing simply from having come into contact with the ice. He cannot believe that this strange and terrifying power comes from water magic. Luz calmly confirms that it is simply an application of water magic techniques. Nearby, Meliana observes the exchange with great curiosity, because even she has not seen water magic used in this way before. The other students are equally confused. None of them have ever seen an ice shield before, nor witnessed water magic being manipulated in this way. Jess refuses to accept what he is seeing and convinces himself that Luz is simply using some strange trick with water techniques. Brian mutters that this year's newbies are nothing but troublemakers, and Jess decides that, regardless of the strange abilities Luz possesses, he is going to teach him a lesson. At the same time, Jess looks toward Neil, who continues to defeat the senior students one after another, and immediately lunges toward him. Neil notices Jess approaching and gets excited, because he assumes Jess is about to become his next punching bag. Neil throws a powerful punch at him, but Jess dodges the attack with ease and laughs as he tells him he missed. Neil smiles at the challenge before him. Over the next few moments, Jess moves so fast that Neil cannot land a single blow. However, Jess is not really focused on defeating Neil in the middle of the chaos, but is secretly using Neil as a distraction so he can approach Luz. As soon as he sees an opportunity, Jess lunges toward Luz with clear intent to kill him. Before he can reach him, Neil suddenly lunges from the front and attacks Jess directly. Jess dodges the blow once more and appears instantly behind Luz before attempting another surprise attack. However, Luz raises another ice shield and blocks it completely. Luz mocks Jess and tells him that the only thing he talks about is honor and pride, but that the only thing he does is resort to surprise attacks from behind. According to Luz, noble ideals are worth nothing in front of him. Jess responds immediately and says that, as a noble, he simply makes the necessary decisions to ensure victory. To him, winning is his destiny. Even as they keep fighting, both Jess and Luz trade biting and playful banter during the battle. Neil gets more and more irritated while watching them. Suddenly, he lunges into them. Of their fight and attacks again, Luz narrowly dodges the blow and looks confused since Neil is supposed to be fighting on his side. Furthermore, being forced into a battle of 2-on-1 starts to irritate him. Jess suddenly believes that he finally has the advantage now that Luz is distracted. He lunges toward him for another attack. But at the last possible second, Neil catches up to him and pushes him violently. Jess is enraged at Neil's reckless and maniacal behavior as he goes flying backward. Neil yells at him and tells him that he has to stop underestimating him and realize that teaming up is the smartest strategy. Now that Jess is out of combat, Neil turns to Luz with excitement burning in his eyes. He tells him that, now that the annoying noble is gone, the time for them to fight face-to-face has finally arrived. The professor watches them both carefully and realizes that they are using combat styles focused on speed, precision, and close-quarters movements. In his eyes, both are true battle geniuses. At this rate, they could even surpass William himself. Luz continues to dodge Neil's relentless attacks until he suddenly grabs Neil's arm and throws a punch directly at his throat, which turns out to be Neil's weak point. Neil immediately has difficulty breathing and is momentarily breathless from the blow. Feig is instantly angered at Luz and yells at him, because attacking someone's throat is extremely dangerous. While Luz's attention is diverted from Neil for just a brief second, Neil suddenly grabs his hand. Anger flashes in Neil's eyes as he realizes he has finally caught him. He tells Luz that now he is going to make him feel real pain. Neil throws his head forward and headbutts Luz, while murmuring that someone like Luz should never have been able to fight him on equal footing. According to Neil, this has only just begun. Luz looks at him coldly and reminds him that the Academy rules clearly state that students must not intentionally try to cause serious injury. In Luz's judgment, Neil has already crossed that line. At that moment, Luz releases the water element within his body. Instantly, jets of water begin to flood the place around him as his awakened water element gushes outward. Neil observes the scene with growing interest, but remains completely confident in himself. Simple water magic is nowhere near enough to stop him. The professor himself says that this training aims to test the strength of their bodies, so Neil refuses to retreat or dodge the attack. Luz remains completely imperturbable before Neil's confidence. Calmly, he asks him if he would prefer something stronger. The instant those words leave his mouth, the water surrounding them transforms into ice and freezes Neil's body. Neil immediately realizes that the pain running through him is unbearable. He quickly releases his fire element and desperately melts the ice trapping him. When he finally breaks free, he seems even more crazed than before. A wild smile spreads across his face as he declares that fighting Luz is making him stronger. For that reason, he insists that their battle must continue. One night, when Neil is still just a child, he kneels by a river and drinks water while trying to understand the strange pain that constantly burns his body. While sitting there alone in the dark, he suddenly notices a pack of wolves slowly approaching him. Fear takes hold of him immediately. Before he can react properly, the wolves lunge at him and begin to tear his body. Neil desperately tries to defend himself, but one of the wolves sinks its teeth into his arm, while another bites deep into his leg. Despite being just a child, Neil possesses terrifying strength. With sheer force, he pries open the jaws of one of the wolves and frees his trapped arm. Rage explodes inside him. The pain flooding his body drives him into a frenzy. And in that moment, he tears the wolves apart with his own hands. That night changes him forever. While the bloody bodies of the wolves lie scattered around him, Neil reaches a conclusion. Pain proves that a person is truly alive. Strength is what allows people to survive. The more pain he endures, the stronger he becomes. Only the strong survive in this world, and that little child manages to kill all the killer wolves that attack him. That is why Neil constantly seeks pain. Pain is what defines his existence and shapes who he is. Back to the present, Neil lunges again at Luz with indifference. As he charges forward, he tells Luz that the two of them are the same. In his eyes, both are monsters chasing greater power. Luz responds immediately by using his martial arts technique, concentrating both his mind and his strength into a single movement, and throws a powerful kick directly at Neil's face. The blow hits the mark perfectly, but instead of staggering, Neil enjoys the pain. That reaction does nothing but frustrate Luz even more. He attacks again and again without stopping, landing blow after blow on Neil, while he continues to smile at the punishment and enjoying every blow he receives. Feig and Kane watch the fight completely baffled. At this rate, Luz might actually end up killing Neil. What terrifies them even more is that Neil seems to become wilder and more dangerous with every passing second. Realizing how out of control the situation is becoming, they both decide they must stop Luz before things get even worse. Neil refuses to back down and yells that the fight is not over yet. He lunges again toward Luz, but he quickly dodges the attack. At the same time, Luz struggles internally while trying to figure out how to stop this complete maniac without violating the Academy rules. He wonders if immobilizing Neil might finally be enough to contain him. Luz tells Neil to calm down before landing a punch to his stomach. Immediately after, he uses Ice Tempest and freezes Neil against the wall. However, Neil releases his fire attribute again and melts the ice trapping him. Watching all this unfold, the professor finally begins to show genuine interest in his gaze. The fight is only now becoming entertaining. Neil falls to the ground, but continues to refuse to give up. He declares that this is nowhere near enough to satisfy him and urges Luz to attack him again with everything he has. Then suddenly, something unexpected happens. Instead of Neil lunging at Luz once more, a powerful force slams him directly into the ground. Neil barely realizes what happens before seeing Kylie standing there. Kylie coldly tells the now unconscious Neil that he has gone too far. In her eyes, he is nothing more than a muscle-headed idiot who completely loses control of himself. The professor reacts instantly as soon as he sees Kylie. It is painfully obvious that he is in love with her, because he practically lights up with excitement upon realizing that he hasn't seen her in a long time. In his mind, she seems even more beautiful than before, and the overwhelming aura that radiates from her body completely captivates him. However, Kylie immediately checks his enthusiasm and forces him to face reality. She asks him what he plans to do if a student dies on the first day of class, and reminds him to keep in mind the warning the director gave him previously. The professor becomes embarrassed and quickly defends himself. He insists that he is not an irresponsible and privileged fool, and claims that he is only trying to bring out the potential of the students through combat. Kylie mocks him and tells him that he should sincerely hope that he is just an idiot, because she has specific orders to protect Luz, and he should understand exactly what that implies. Next, she informs him that the director wants to see him in his office at the end of class. The professor realizes immediately that another reprimand awaits him. Even so, when he looks back at the first-year students, he cannot help but think of the enormous potential they possess. In particular, Luz, Feig, and Kane catch his attention much more than the others. He tells Neil to put his clothes back on and warns him that he is willing to overlook his crazy behavior this time. However, if Neil loses control again in the future, his academy credits will be reduced. Neil barely pays attention to the warning because his mind is completely elsewhere. He realizes that he is capable of resisting the attacks of someone at the master level. At the same time, he also realizes that if he keeps destroying his clothes every time he fights, he will end up broke from having to replace them. For that reason, he decides that he has no choice but to start hunting monsters to earn money. Shortly after the class bell rings and the professor dismisses everyone, he announces that the senior students may leave, while the first years must rest, recover, and drink potions together. He also warns the first years that, from now on, he plans to demand even more from them, so they must prepare themselves and not start crying later. After class, Kane tells Luz that, in the 100-year history of the academy, there are almost no cases in which first-year students manage to defeat senior students. Luz reflects carefully on that statement, as he does not remember reading anything about it in the academy documents. Kane then explains that this has only happened 3 times throughout history, and that, in each of those years, several grandmasters end up emerging from among the first-year students. Luz immediately asks when the most recent case occurred. Kane explains that the most recent example took place during the years when his parents attended the academy. Apparently, even they managed to defeat senior students during their first year. Meanwhile, the bruised, bloody, and humiliated senior students slowly return to their classroom. One of the seniors apologizes to Jess for being too weak, but also admits that Luz and Neil are simply too strong. He quietly suggests that perhaps they should take care of those two from the shadows. Instead, Jess immediately rejects that idea. He wants to defeat them openly and stand above everyone else as the strongest, because he believes that position belongs to him by right. He tells his partner not to rush, because there will be many opportunities to get revenge later. In Jess's eyes, no matter how talented or powerful Luz and Neil become, they are still mere citizens of the Empire. The nobles are the ones who truly control the fate of the Empire. Later, Feig talks to Meliana and asks her what she thinks of Luz's technique. She points out that his talent with water magic is incredible. Feig also suggests that, if Meliana stays close to Luz and trains by his side, perhaps she will also become stronger. Meliana thinks silently about Luz and the overwhelming power behind his water magic. Deep down, she feels she could never imitate what he does. Even if she trains by his side, her own water attribute techniques seem completely insufficient to her. Before Luz appeared, nobody managed to use water magic in such strange and powerful ways. For that reason, Meliana realizes that she desperately needs to create more water attribute attack techniques that are easier for her to use. Feig asks her if she is really pushing herself this hard at just 16 years old. Meliana replies quietly that she has to do it for the sake of her family, because she wants them to feel proud of her. Feig already knows that is exactly the answer Meliana is going to give. After listening to her, he calls Luz and tells him that Meliana wants to talk to him. The moment he says it, everyone nearby immediately turns toward Meliana. And under all those gazes, she starts to get nervous. Most students instantly assume that Meliana is about to confess her feelings to Luz in front of everyone. But that is not at all what she intends. Luz approaches the girls, and Feig explains to him that, since he has used water magic before, he wants to know if he can teach some of those techniques to Meliana. Luz agrees immediately, without hesitation, since he is kind-hearted by nature. He says he doesn't mind at all. In fact, since they are friends, he would be happy to help her. The moment Meliana hears the word friends, she feels strangely confused. In the classroom, everyone notices her reaction and is puzzled. That is when Meliana confesses in a low voice that she could bring trouble to his life one day, and that, even then, she hopes he will not regret having become friends with her. Luz tells Meliana that he will never regret being her friend, because he could never regret the people he cares about. Upon hearing that, Meliana gets even more emotional and quickly says she doesn't want to drag him into the problems surrounding her life. Before running away suddenly, everyone sees her leave with bewildered expressions. Feig immediately runs after her and apologizes to Luz along the way, saying that he is going to talk to Meliana for a while to make sure she is okay. As they disappear, Luz thinks silently about how everyone around him carries different burdens and struggles. He already understands that, if anything, he begins to feel that he might end up being the one who causes trouble for Meliana. Instead, he turns to Kane and asks him if he knows anything about her past. Kane explains that Meliana is the daughter of the Royce family and also the granddaughter of a grandmaster. When her grandmother was still alive, the Royce family prospered and had considerable influence. However, after her grandmother's death, the family gradually lost its power and its status. Beyond that, Kane admits he doesn't know much about what happened afterward. He says that Feig probably knows much more about the situation than he does. Luz then turns to Kara and asks her if she knows anything else. Kara explains that the Royce family ended up clashing with the Arcanist Association. Upon hearing that, Luz becomes interested immediately. He asks if the problem Meliana mentions is related to the Arcanist Association, and if Kara knows any additional details. Unfortunately, Kara shakes her head and admits that is all she knows. For now, Luz realizes that if he wants real answers, he will have to ask Feig directly, or Meliana. The next day, the first-year students gather at the Academy's first magical training field. Standing before them, the professor announces that magic is the goddess's blessing and the true essence of the world itself. He explains that during this class, he will teach them how to control magic properly and how to use arcane martial arts in combat. Next, he introduces himself as Professor Sid. Kane notices that Luz seems irritated all of a sudden and asks him what is wrong. After all, Luz is incredibly excited about the magic class. A little earlier, Luz admits quietly that he is still excited to learn, but for some reason, He already feels as if the professor has it in for him. Almost immediately after those words leave his mouth, Professor Sid appears right in front of Luz. He tells him coldly that students should not chat while the professor is speaking. He openly states that he hates rude and idiotic people in his class. Without hesitation, he announces that 1 credit will be deducted from Luz's account. Professor Sid continues to insult him and says that, unlike certain brainless idiots, students are expected to follow academy rules correctly. According to him, if Luz keeps breaking the rules, he will end up with no credits left. A moment later, Professor Sid deducts another credit while accusing Luz of being vulgar and disrespectful, although Luz never says anything offensive despite the unfair treatment. He remains silent because he already understands that the professor is deliberately attacking him. As Professor Sid walks away, he tells Luz that he should learn proper noble etiquette and culture if he really wants to behave like a respectable student. Then Professor Sid raises his finger, and suddenly, a gigantic sand creature emerges from the ground through the use of magic. Both Kane and Luz gaze in awe at the huge creature. Professor Sid explains that, in real combat, the arcane martial art requires the mastery of both martial arts and magic. If someone wishes to become a true apprentice, they must first learn to manifest mana in the form of a weapon. Once they master that skill, they will be able to cover their entire body with arcane armor. While he speaks, Professor Sid demonstrates the technique by forming a sword with mana in his right hand. He explains that, after mastering those fundamentals, a person can finally become a true fighter. To control mana through the body, one must connect thoughts with movements and guide mana through precise physical actions. To demonstrate further, Professor Sid spins the sword in his hand before launching a slash toward the gigantic sand knight. The attack cuts the construct in half and leaves the students stunned by the destructive power of arcane martial arts. Afterward, he tells the students that later everyone will try to attack stone statues in the same way, and that the student who causes the most damage will receive 5 extra credits. However, before that begins, he plans to teach them how to attack correctly with magic. Professor Sid orders everyone to split into groups according to their attributes. Since Neil possesses dual attributes, he does not need to join any group. Meanwhile, students with water attributes are instructed to step aside to practice arcane armor and help with the warm-up exercises. Instead, the different groups begin to separate from one another. Kane, Miliana, Feig, and Luz all head toward their specific attribute section. Almost immediately, several students from the other groups start mocking Miliana. They laugh at her and sarcastically refer to water users as famous human punching bags. Miliana feels deeply embarrassed because, once again, she is relegated to a secondary role in a corner while the other students have the opportunity to attack directly. At the statues, the frustration she feels inside does not stop growing. At this rate, she believes there is no way she will ever become a grandmaster. In the middle of her stress and frustration, she murmurs that she wants to prove her strength to that person. Upon hearing that, Luz wonders who exactly she is talking about. He suspects it may have something to do with the Arcanist Association. Luz asks her directly what is worrying her so much, but Miliana gets embarrassed quickly and insists that it is nothing important and has nothing to do with him. While Luz continues preparing, he wonders silently why Miliana is so obsessed with offensive abilities. From his point of view, water attributes naturally possess stronger support magic than most other elements. Supporting allies and disrupting enemies are extremely important things during battle. Miliana hears his thoughts and explains firmly that she wants to become a grandmaster and restore her family's lost reputation. To achieve that dream, she believes she must be capable of both attacking and defending herself effectively. She insists that the goddess would never create an incomplete attribute, which means that powerful offensive water techniques must exist somewhere. Due to that belief, she spends years trying to improve the water blade through the use of magic potions, while developing variations of the technique with multiple impacts. However, despite all her efforts, she is still unable to overcome the lack of raw destructive power of water magic. Deep down, she begins to fear that perhaps water users can never reach the Grandmaster level. At that moment, another boy from her class approaches Miliana and tells her that it will be his turn soon, so she needs to warm up using water support techniques. Miliana creates a water shield around her so he can practice properly, but the constant attacks begin to exhaust her. The repeated effort is clearly starting to take a toll on her body. Watching this scene makes Luz reflect deeply on water attributes and the idea of becoming a grandmaster. The situation painfully reminds him of his previous life. Back then, people constantly mocked him for his disability. They laughed at him for researching martial arts, even though he couldn't walk properly and constantly struggled with terrible asthma. Many people bullied him and called him pathetic for trying to pursue impossible dreams. Some even stole his research while telling him to stop glorifying failure. Others cruelly told him to give up his work and just die. Looking at Miliana, Luz realizes that she fully understands her own weaknesses, but still refuses to give up on her dream. Just like Cain, she keeps moving forward no matter what others say about her. For that reason, Luz starts to think that maybe he can show her a completely different path for martial arts. And water magic. Suddenly, he steps forward and creates a powerful ice shield with his own magic. The force of the technique launches the annoying boy backward instantly. Luz then turns to Miliana and tells her that he also believes in the potential of water magic. Due to that belief, he asks her if she would observe his technique carefully. Miliana blushes slightly, seeing how close Luz has suddenly moved to her side, and nervously asks him if he really means it. Luz calls Professor Sid and asks if he can also try attacking one of the statues. Already irritated by Luz's presence, Professor Sid warns him that if he fails to damage the statue, even more credits will be deducted from his account. He asks him sarcastically if Luz really plans to waste his precious ice magic on something so resistant, and tells him he should focus on basic mana control. Luz replies calmly that, in fact, he has discovered a better method to increase the offensive power of water attributes. As soon as everyone hears that claim, laughter immediately spreads across the training field. The idea seems absurd to them. Even Miliana points out nervously that the statues are special artifacts, created from rare magical materials and heavily reinforced with earth magic. According to her, common water spells cannot even scratch them. She worries that Luz could lose even more credits if he fails. Luz simply reassures her and tells her that everything is fine because he already has a plan. He walks calmly toward the gigantic knight statue and picks up sand with his hand. While staring at it intently, he remembers an old saying from his previous world that says soft things can end up defeating hard ones. If he combines high-pressure water with sand and shoots it at an extreme speed, the result can be powerful enough to cut almost anything. With that thought in mind, Luz immediately puts the idea into practice. Moments later, the huge knight statue is cut into countless pieces. Professor Sid watches the destroyed remains of his precious statue in total disbelief. Meanwhile, Luz looks at him calmly and declares that that is the true nature of water magic. During the night, Cain, Kara, and Luz return to their dorms together. While Cain talks excitedly about what happened earlier in class, he tells Luz that he really would have liked to see Professor Sid's expression the moment Luz earns all those credits. According to Cain, it is a true masterpiece. Professor Sid looks completely miserable, almost as if he were suffering a nightmare. The instant he sees Luz launch a clean and powerful water attribute attack, his face turns pale, as if he had just eaten rotten bread. After that, he practically runs out of class. As soon as class ends, Luz replies indifferently that, at that moment, he is so focused on experimenting with water magic that he doesn't even bother paying attention to the professor's reaction, because for him, that man's expression is simply not worth seeing. Cain quickly changes the subject to return to water magic and mentions that they should seriously consider Feig's suggestion. He explains that Miliana is already working very hard to forge a new path for herself. She is even spending money on expensive mental recovery potions to keep training. He also learns that she plans to rent private training rooms during her free time, so she can keep practicing alone. Cain points out that joining forces with her could also benefit Luz. Kara suddenly joins the conversation and explains that renting a training room costs around 30 silver coins, while mental recovery potions can cost almost 300 gold coins. Upon hearing those figures, Luz is completely surprised. The prices are much higher than he expected. After thinking about it for a moment, he turns to Kara and asks her for a favor related to the upcoming training mission that they are supposed to participate in over the next few days. The three continue discussing what could happen during the mission while they return to the dorms. The next day, the professor gathers the whole class outdoors, on the academy grounds. He gives them a speech about how their bodies are becoming stronger every day and refined. Seeing their progress seems to fill him with pride and satisfaction. For that reason, he announces that they are finally ready to start participating in the Academy's official training missions. According to him, these missions are not only part of their responsibilities as students, but they are also important opportunities for growth. He explains that the Candria Arcanist Academy is connected to the great forest of Mondo along the western border. Long ago, that forest was the territory of terrifying monsters, but over time, it has become a natural border that separates several important nations. Even now, countless monsters continue to inhabit the forest. The further one goes toward the center, the more dangerous and powerful the monsters become. By comparison, the creatures living near the outer edge are much weaker. The academy itself was built in part to help defend the empire against threats emerging from the forest. That is why students are regularly sent on training missions to exterminate the weaker monsters in the surrounding areas. The professor explains that all the magic crystals collected from defeated monsters can be exchanged for credits later, or rewards after returning to the academy. In addition, the student who brings the largest quantity of crystals will receive an additional reward. However, he also warns them that recklessness has consequences. If students face monsters that are too powerful and need a professor to come to their aid, they will immediately lose 1 credit as punishment. After finishing his explanation, the professor gives them permission to prepare to leave. Neil looks incredibly excited after hearing all this, because, in his mind, this is finally an opportunity to fully unleash himself in actual combat. Meanwhile, Feig asks Luz if he really plans to use real combat situations to help train Miliana. Luz calmly replies that real battles reveal a person's true skills much better than controlled training ever could. For that reason, they all agree to form a team of 5 people. They believe that combining their strength and teamwork will make them much more effective than wasting huge amounts of money on expensive training rooms. Feig then turns to Miliana and asks her what she thinks of the idea. To everyone's surprise, Miliana seems genuinely excited to join them. Just after, the professor claps his hands and announces that each group of 5 first-year students will complete their first training mission together with several senior students. He explains that this arrangement gives the first years the opportunity to learn from the seniors' experience, while staying relatively safe during their first mission. Shortly after that announcement, Luz realizes that Jess is staring at him from nearby. Jess approaches him and comments coldly that, somehow, they have met again during the training mission preparations. He reminds Luz that training missions are extremely dangerous, and with sarcasm, he tells him to make sure he doesn't end up dead out there. Luz replies calmly that people only truly become stronger after overcoming dangerous situations. Jess clicks his tongue in annoyance before walking away and muttering that Luz is an arrogant bastard. Once he leaves, Jess quietly tells one of his friends that if a fight breaks out during the mission, none of the veterans should help the rookies at all. At the same time, Kane quietly warns Luz that professors usually watch the missions from afar. They rarely interfere directly, unless it is absolutely necessary. However, he suspects that some veterans might intentionally lure the rookies into the depths of the forest and push them towards stronger monsters just to make it harder for them. Luz simply replies that stronger monsters mean more valuable magic crystals, which also means more money and more academy credits. Shortly after, all the groups of students begin to enter the forest together. As they go deeper, Luz talks to Kane about the details of the forest itself and wonders if there could still be any powerful survivors from ancient times hidden there. Kane explains that the saints of the regions finished off most of the dangerous giants a long time ago, so supposedly none are left near the outer regions anymore. At best, they might encounter a few fighter-class monsters, if they are lucky. Nearby, the senior student in charge of supervising their group listens to the conversation and mocks them in secret. In his opinion, fighter-class monsters usually require several trained fighters to work together just to survive. The idea that a handful of apprentices think they can defeat such creatures seems incredibly naive to him. Suddenly, a gigantic monster appears right in front of the group. Even the veteran supervisor seems stunned, because the creature standing before them is a large fighter-class bear. Instead of helping immediately, the veteran quickly jumps into a nearby tree and hides among the branches. He thinks silently that the timing is perfect, because a monster of this level should be more than enough to overwhelm the inexperienced rookies from his safe hiding spot. He decides that he will simply watch the whole disaster unfold comfortably from above. Luz becomes irritated immediately as soon as he realizes the situation. Meanwhile, the veteran thinks silently about how dangerous the great bear really is. The creature possesses overwhelming resistance, along with incredibly tough defenses. In his mind, these students are about to experience a brutal fight for which they are absolutely not prepared. Despite this, Luz immediately orders everyone in his group to take combat positions. The moment the bear lets out a deafening roar, The 5 members prepare their weapons and attack together. Feig attacks first with his spear, while Kane attacks from behind using his newly developed martial arts technique. However, the moment his attack lands, Kane realizes that the monster's body is as hard as rock. When the bear counterattacks, Kane barely manages to defend against it. Just after, Feig charges into the attack again, while Kara attacks from another angle. Seeing them fight together fills Luz with satisfaction, because he is happy to see everyone actively collaborating in real combat. However, the constant attacks soon draw the Great Bear's attention toward Luz and Miliana. In response, Miliana quickly uses her water magic to restrict the bear's movements, and then combines her control over water with a martial arts move. She launches the huge creature into the air, almost as if it were a bowling ball. Luz watches surprised, because he had never seen that technique before. Feig immediately explains that the move is actually an original creation of Miliana's, a technique that combines water magic with the principles of jiu-jitsu. Upon hearing that, Luz is genuinely impressed, because he is glad to see her creating unique techniques of her own. Since he doesn't want to be left behind, Luz lunges at the bear himself, because he also wants to demonstrate his own strength. He delivers a brutal kick directly to the creature's chest, near its heart, and sends the giant beast flying backward. Immediately after, he forms a compressed water sphere and launches it toward the bear. The attack explodes violently upon impact. Before the monster crashes to the ground, Miliana is stunned after witnessing the damage Luz inflicts. Even students with stronger elemental attributes barely manage to scratch the great bear, but Luz wounds it severely using only water magic. Luz explains calmly that it all comes down to scientific principles. When water is superheated, it compresses and detonates under pressure. It creates steam powerful enough to burn targets internally and alter their breathing. Even if an enemy possesses resistant skin or solid defenses, internal damage is much harder to resist. Miliana soaks up every word he says, as if she were receiving an important life lesson. Deep down in her being, she begins to wonder if she can also apply those ideas to her own techniques. Afterward, Luz suddenly gives her a special magic ring created by the Candice Trading Company, something he had previously requested with Kara's help. With the ring, Miliana can temporarily use earth, fire, and wind magic along with her natural water attribute, just as Luz himself does. Luz got the idea after noticing the number of different rings Sid wears during class. Seeing that, he is inspired to experiment with combining multiple attributes in the same way. Thanks to that inspiration, he specifically arranges for one of the rings to be made for Miliana as well. Miliana feels genuinely happy after receiving such a thoughtful gift. However, the moment she puts the ring on, a sudden fire attack rushes straight toward her. Luz immediately shouts a warning to protect her. Fortunately, Miliana notices the impending attack at the last possible second and barely manages to avoid being killed. She has even survived. She stares at it stunned, while thinking about the terrifying amount of power behind that attack. Everyone turns immediately toward the direction it comes from, hidden among the trees. The veteran watching them cannot believe what he is seeing. A large fighter-class bear disappears completely under that overwhelming force, as if its body had never existed. At the same time, Luz and the rest of his group suddenly perceive that something huge is approaching them through the forest. The giant trees surrounding them begin to shake violently due to the weight and the presence of the creatures moving among them. Moments later, huge monsters emerge from the shadows. They are Blaskins, monstrous apes, creatures like them, full of fire and pure madness rooted deep in their nature. Kane comments immediately that the situation is extremely grave. Luz asks him quickly what kind of monsters the Blaskins really are. Kane explains quietly that these creatures should never be near the academy grounds. The appearance of a single Blaskin near this area would already be alarming, so the fact that an entire pack appears together is almost impossible to believe. Shortly after, the Blaskins begin to devour the carcass of the dead Great Bear right in front of everyone. The disgusting sight almost makes Miliana vomit, while the other students also struggle to endure the horrible scene. At the same time, they realize that the other groups of students who are further inside the forest are probably also in danger. Their fears are soon confirmed, as all the other groups also run into Blaskins, and none of the students are even remotely prepared to fight monsters of this level. Panic spreads quickly when everyone realizes they need to find a professor immediately. Meanwhile, the supervising professors themselves are also baffled, because victims suddenly start appearing everywhere, and none of them understand what is happening. In the middle of all this chaos, there is still one completely crazy person willing to stand directly in front of a blastkin without fear. And that person is Neil. He laughs out loud while staring at the monster and asks if it really wants to fight him. Instead of fear, excitement floods his face as he cracks his knuckles in anticipation. Everywhere, students flee desperately from the monsters. Meanwhile, Luz reflects carefully on the situation and realizes that, if monsters that should never exist near the academy suddenly appear here, then something much more dangerous must be happening behind the scenes. At that precise moment, the senior student hiding in the tree suddenly realizes that one of the Blastkins has detected his presence. Panicked, he quickly covers himself with earth armor to protect himself, but fear continues to invade his body. Before he can react, the Blastkin crushes him with a single punch, powerful enough to almost shatter his body. Just when the monster prepares to trample him to death, Luz appears suddenly and kicks the Blastkin directly in the face, causing the giant creature to fly backward. Without wasting a second, Luz orders Kara and Miliana to grab the injured senior and flee immediately. They obey his order immediately. Even while they retreat, they beg Luz to flee with them. Luz tells them not to worry, because he will catch up with them very soon. The Blastkin that Luz attacks gets even angrier after being humiliated. Rage completely consumes the creature, which opens its mouth and launches a huge fireball toward the group. Luz instantly warns everyone to take cover and dodge the attack. The intensity of the flames is so overwhelming that Miliana and Kara barely survive the explosion. Feig quickly realizes that the Blastkins are actively trying to kill them. Instead of just attacking randomly, Kane understands that they have no choice but to fight together if they want to survive. Using wind magic to accelerate his movements, Kane lunges toward the Blastkin at incredible speed and attacks it with his dagger. Although the attack only manages to slightly wound the monster, it manages to cause damage. At the same time, Feig charges forward with his spear and successfully wounds the creature's arm. Before striking again and pushing it to the ground, Kane watches with amazement at the brute force behind their attacks. Feig follows immediately, activating his holy spear technique and unleashing Crescent Fall, creating a tornado-like force directed straight at the Blastkin's heart. For a moment, it seems the attack succeeds. However, the creature suddenly opens its eyes again, and Feig realizes with horror that it uses crystal magic to reinforce itself, without stopping. She attacks once more with her holy spear, and pierces directly through its body, which causes a violent eruption around it. Standing next to the monster afterward, she feels a brief moment of pride for finally having defeated it. But that moment disappears instantly when Kane screams at her not to let her guard down. As soon as Feig turns around, she sees the Blastkin standing right on top of her, despite everything she has already done to it. The creature opens its mouth and launches another devastating burst of fire directly toward her. At the last possible second, Luz jumps in front of her and protects them both with an ice shield. Immediately after, he creates huge ice spears that sprout from the ground and traps the Blastkin in layers of frozen ice. For the first time in several moments, the group finally has a brief second to breathe. Feig's thank you, Luz. However, while she continues to struggle to understand how the Blastkin survives, even after having its heart pierced, Luz barely listens to her, because all his attention remains fixed on the monster itself. He quickly realizes the creature is preparing to launch another fire breath attack. Without hesitation, he pushes Feig away again, just as the Blastkin breaks through the ice spears that surrounded it. To everyone's horror, the wounds previously inflicted by Kane and Feig begin to heal almost instantly, and the whole group watches in disbelief, because, although they know that Blastkins are incredibly aggressive monsters, none of them has ever heard of such terrifying regeneration abilities. While Luz watches the monster recover, he suddenly realizes that this behavior reminds him of Neil. Just like Neil, the creature seems to become stronger through pain, and it fights in other parts of the forest. The professor fights several Blastkins at once and becomes increasingly frustrated, no matter how many times he wounds them. The monsters keep healing and becoming stronger. He immediately realizes that there is something very strange about these creatures, and that, at this rate, the students scattered throughout the forest will end up being massacred. Back on the battlefield, Luz also understands how terrible the situation is becoming, since more and more Blastkins slowly surround their group from all directions. At the same time, Miliana and Kara fight desperately to defend themselves, but end up suffering wounds during the attacks. Nearby, the injured senior student finally regains consciousness. Instead of panicking, a sinister smile spreads across his face, because in his mind, Everything is going exactly according to plan. His mission is already accomplished. Now he only has to let those defective monsters finish eliminating Luz. And the rest of the commoners, the horrible truth finally comes to light. The entire situation is part of the veteran's plan from the beginning. Meanwhile, right in front of Luz, the Blaskins become even more violent. And maddened, Kane watches in disbelief as the monsters begin to use arcane armor martial arts techniques. Just like trained fighters, the creatures attack again, while Luz desperately blocks their onslaught. In the middle of the chaos, he realizes something terrifying. The Blastkins are specifically attacking him above everyone else. Suddenly, one of the apes creates a huge fireball, almost the size of a small sun, and launches it directly toward Luz. At that very instant, all the other Blastkins surrounding him create their own gigantic fireballs. Feig and Kane immediately run toward Luz, while desperately trying to protect him from the incoming attacks. Then, in the next instant, a gigantic explosion erupts deep in the forest with such force that it looks like a huge nuclear detonation. While observing the destruction from afar, the old man smiles with total satisfaction because he believes his mission has finally been accomplished. However, Luz is not someone who dies that easily. Right in the middle of the huge explosion, some bright blue rays suddenly sprout from inside the flames themselves. Even the fire apes stop, bewildered, as they observe the strange light emerging from the destruction. Moments later, a violent tornado erupts that completely wipes out the sea of flames surrounding the area. Feig and Kane immediately recognize that blue energy, and both realize instantly that Luz has somehow survived one of the most devastating attacks ever launched against first-year students. He not only survived, but emerges from it in an even more terrifying state than before. Feig points out, incredulous, that controlling mana in such a vast area solely through force of will is something that only masters or individuals above that level should be able to do. Kane finally understands that Luz has been hiding his true strength this whole time. Meanwhile, Luz himself thinks about the tension spreading through his body as he accelerates the circulation of mana throughout his entire being. He temporarily forces his body to reach a mana control comparable to that of a master. However, the pressure and the pain tearing through his body are becoming unbearable, and he knows that he will very soon reach his limit. Therefore, he realizes that he has to end the battle as soon as possible. With that thought in mind, he activates his breathing technique along with his ice skills and summons a huge tsunami of water around him. The huge waves spread outward and completely engulf the fire apes, plunging the monsters into confusion and panic. The next instant, the water transforms into countless sharp icicles. Luz takes a step forward, and the frozen battlefield allows him to accelerate his movements until reaching terrifying speeds. He lunges toward one of the apes and hits it with such force as to launch it violently into the air. Another Blastkin attacks him immediately after, but Luz defends himself effortlessly using his axiomatic acceleration technique. Before counterattacking two different apes at the same time, his speed becomes so overwhelming that the monsters can no longer follow his movements correctly. One moment he appears next to them, and the next instant he disappears before attacking somewhere completely different. However, Luz does not limit himself to attacking blindly. As he moves across the battlefield, he secretly creates a huge 8-trigram pattern under the ground. At each point of the formation stands one of the Blastkins, trapped in its position. Using his ice skills, Luz immobilizes each and every one of the monsters simultaneously. Afterward, he rises into the air and unleashes a relentless rain of palm strikes that push all the trapped monsters deep into the frozen formation. The ice seals them together in such a way that escaping becomes impossible. Once the entire structure is complete, Luz lands on the ground and silently contemplates what he has created. Suddenly, cracks spread throughout the huge frozen prison. Seconds later, the entire structure shatters, and every bone trapped inside it breaks into countless pieces, like a shattered building toy collapsing into fragments. Observing this from afar, the hidden veteran realizes with rage that there is no longer any room for doubt. Once again, Luz survives and wins against all odds. Meanwhile, Kane and Feig contemplate the battlefield with total amazement, as Luz annihilates an entire herd of Blastkins almost instantly. And when the battle finally ends, Luz suddenly notices something strange. Wind mana and water mana begin to respond to him more naturally than before, almost as if he finds them easier to control. When he finally lands back on the ground, Kane congratulates him and admits that he never imagined that ice attribute techniques could possess such terrifying power. Feig immediately interrupts both of them and tells them to stop behaving like lovesick idiots, because they still have to escape before another ambush happens. Luz nods quickly and realizes that now is the perfect time to retreat, since the professors finally decide to intervene directly, not far away. The veteran secretly observes the arrival of reinforcements and realizes that it is now impossible to continue with his plan. Thinking quickly, he punches himself in the chest, with enough force to hurt himself before collapsing to the ground, and thus appear as another helpless victim of the attack. Shortly after, the principal himself arrives at the scene and orders all the professors to focus on protecting the students while eliminating the monsters. The whole group is stunned to see the principal appear in person on the battlefield. The principal immediately approaches Luz and his group and asks them if they are okay. Kane quickly explains that they survived thanks exclusively to Luz. Feig adds that Luz defeated several masterclass Blaskins on his own, and admits that, without him, they probably would have all died. Upon hearing this, even the principal is visibly bewildered, because defeating monsters of that level solo is an incredible achievement. However, Luz tells him that there is something about the whole incident that seems deeply wrong to him. Next, he shows the principal a frozen fragment of one of the Blaskins trapped in the ice. After examining it, the principal immediately tells Luz and the others to return to the academy, while he personally handles the rest of the situation. Later, Luz visits the academy market and enters one of the shops. The shopkeeper tells him that, after everything that happened during the mission, he has accumulated a huge amount of points in academy credits. However, she also seems confused, because despite having earned so much, he keeps buying large quantities of mental recovery potions. She warns him that excessive use of such potions could severely damage his body, to which Luz replies calmly that he is already aware of the risks. Before he can continue, Kylie suddenly appears and asks if she can speak with him in private for a moment. She reveals that, after examining the corpses of the fire apes recovered from the academy incident, the researchers have discovered traces of alchemy, magical drugs, and artificial modifications inside the monsters. That discovery proves that Luz's suspicions are correct. From the beginning, someone has deliberately orchestrated the entire incident. Kylie explains that the enemy forces of the main suspect are behind everything. According to her, it is likely that certain factions are getting impatient because His Majesty and Lady Melian are aging, and no successor to the throne has been officially chosen yet. Therefore, eliminating or controlling the children of important supporters becomes a logical political move, since the Academy has huge influence in the Northern Empire, and whoever controls its future position will gain a significant advantage. Luz finds it hard to believe that such horrible events are due to a succession conflict. Still, he cannot ignore the fact that the fire apes specifically attacked him during the battle. Kylie assures him that she will continue to investigate the matter personally and promises to help him in any way she can. Before leaving, she tells him that he must continue to get stronger, because the principal clearly has high expectations for him. After she leaves, Luz silently looks at the potion in his hand and realizes once again that he really needs to get stronger. Without hesitation, he drinks the entire potion in one gulp and murmurs quietly to himself that this path is exactly what he has always wanted. Afterward, he begins to think about his friends and the dangers that now surround them all. Elsewhere, the senior student responsible for the attack reports directly to his father about the modified monsters. He explains that the experiment successfully confirms an increase in combat abilities within the designated range. However, the results still do not meet expectations, because, although many of the modified monsters self-destruct after dying, the Academy still recovers several corpses. If the principal discovers the whole truth, they could face huge problems. Despite that concern, the mastermind behind the operation remains calm. He explains that the experimental subjects originally come from the Bogdan Empire, so even if the principal finds out something, he will be able to prove very little. More importantly, the man stares at a photo of Luz and wonders who the boy really is. The veteran admits that he has been suspicious of Luz for quite some time now. According to him, the terrifying presence surrounding Luz is impossible to mistake, and he believes it is likely that the principal is helping to hide the boy's true identity. Whatever the truth may be, both agree that Luz is becoming a dangerous obstacle to their plans. The villain calmly burns the photo of Luz before ordering his son to deal with the problem. Immediately, the old man brands Luz as a cursed child capable of causing total destruction, and warns that, if Luz continues to interfere near his secret weapon, everything they have built could collapse beyond repair. After hearing that, the villain orders his son to transmit all the collected information to the top brass of the Arcanist Association. According to him, the association will gladly take advantage of the rumors surrounding the so-called cursed child if the association learns that such a child could exist within the academy itself. It will undoubtedly initiate its own investigation. In the villain's eyes, the enemy of his enemy naturally becomes an ally. The man behind the conspiracy is none other than Prince Bojin himself, the duke who leads the noble faction, and also Brian's father. Shortly after, Luz heads toward the training grounds, where he continues practicing his meditation techniques. Even with his eyes completely closed, he remains fully aware of everything happening around him. Kane suddenly attacks from behind, hoping to catch him off guard, but Luz perceives the movement instantly and blocks the attack without difficulty. Not only does he defend perfectly, but he also counters Kane's desperate blows with his own attacks. In the middle of the exchange, another burst of power suddenly rushes directly toward Luz. This time, the attack comes from the infamous Feig, who never knows how to hold back during a fight. Even when she is just training or practicing with friends, she launches into combat with total intensity, as always. However, just like before, Luz reacts calmly the moment the attack approaches him. An ice shield appears instantly right in front of him and blocks the incoming blow. The rest of the group observes attentively, convinced that they have finally cornered him and landed a decisive blow. They think Luz must have overlooked something this time. Miliana, however, quickly realizes that Luz has already seen through the whole trap, after all. She is absolutely right. Moments later, Luz calmly emerges from the cloud of dust and starts to praise his friends instead of criticizing them. He praises Kane for how much faster they have become and how precise their movements are, and tells him that he truly masters the hit-and-run tactics that they practice together. Next, he congratulates Feig for improving the power of his spear techniques by adapting them from his unarmed combat style. And most importantly, he praises Miliana for skillfully hiding the object during the face-off inside the mud as part of her strategy. Luz admits that he is genuinely happy to see how much stronger and faster all his friends have become in such a short time. He even tells them that, if he hadn't noticed the anomaly thanks to his cold sensitivity, their coordinated attack could have seriously overwhelmed him in an instant. Kane still looks irritated despite the praise, because in his mind that means that, even working together, all of them are still unable to truly catch up to Luz. He points out that Luz escapes the entire attack without receiving a single scratch, which only proves that none of them can reach him yet. Meanwhile, Feig remains fascinated by Luz's strange ability to perceive the movements around him through what he calls cold sense. She admits that she has never heard of any technique even remotely similar to that before. Luz explains that the technique is based on the joint circulation of the mind and mana, and tells her that he himself is still researching and perfecting it. Still, he promises her that, once she understands the proper principles behind it, he will teach her how to use it in future training sessions. While the group talks, Miliana hands Luz a recovery potion, and at the same time, Feig suddenly tries to land another punch on him on the sly. Once again, she fails to hit him at all. Miliana observes this and comments that, at times, Luz seems almost abnormal, like someone who doesn't really belong to this world. As soon as she says that, Luz almost spits out the potion in surprise. Nervousness is reflected on his face, as he quickly asks her why she would say something like that. While he wipes the potion from his mouth, Miliana explains to him that it is because Luz openly shares his knowledge and techniques with others so freely in this world, while most people jealously guard that information within their own families, instead of teaching it to strangers. Because of that, she jokes that Luz must have learned those ideas and values in a completely different life. Upon hearing that, Luz scratches the back of his neck awkwardly, laughs a little, and says that maybe it is simply because he grew up as a commoner, and therefore he had a different education than the nobles. He explains that anyway, everyone in their group constantly teaches each other new things, so he thinks it would be amazing if they all continued to get stronger together as a united team. Finally, Feig tells everyone that it is time to return because martial arts classes await them the next day. Before leaving, she warns Kane and Luz not to sneak off and cause trouble later. Kane mocks her immediately in response, and shortly after, the whole group begins to leave together while they joke among themselves. However, Luz stays behind alone on the training field. He looks in his bag and realizes that, once again, he has almost run out of recovery potions, which means he will have to go get more soon, just as he prepares to drink another potion. Kylie suddenly appears and stops him. She immediately asks him why he is trying to take another one after having drunk a mental recovery potion just yesterday, and reminds him that she had already warned him before that drinking those potions constantly would end up turning his brain into mush. Hearing her words makes Luz reflect deeply on everything that weighs on his shoulders. He remembers the promise he made to his mother that one day he would become a grandmaster so he could take ownership of the orphanage and free it from the association and use that power to protect all the people important to him. Now that he realizes that powerful enemies are starting to target him directly, he becomes even more convinced that he must get stronger at all costs. He insists quietly that he is careful not to overdo it and says that he will be fine in his mind. These potions allow him to double the amount of training he can endure, and unlike others, he cannot afford the luxury of taking things easy. Kylie looks at him seriously and asks him if he is really sure about that. Just after Luz recovers some energy thanks to the potion, Kylie suddenly tenses up inside her armor because she perceives an unusually powerful aura emerging around. Luz feels confused by her reaction and asks her if he did something strange without realizing it before. Because, for some reason, his mana suddenly begins to flow through his body much more smoothly than before. Kylie struggles to respond because even she doesn't fully understand what she perceives. Just when she is about to say something, she notices the large number of empty potion bottles scattered around. Instantly, irritation is reflected on her face as she realizes that Luz has drunk them all by himself. Embarrassment is reflected on Luz's face, while Kylie explains angrily that she has checked the exchange logs and has discovered that this is already the 8th time this month that he has exchanged for more potions. That means that basically, he is drinking at least 2 every day. Luz replies that, if he really wants to become a grandmaster as soon as possible, this is the only option he has, especially since his body hasn't shown any serious side effects so far. Kylie immediately disagrees and insists that becoming a grandmaster is not something achieved so easily. According to her, what he really needs right now is proper basic training, instead of relying on drug-like substances to push himself beyond his limits. She warns him that, even if he cannot feel the damage, those potions could end up completely destroying his insides and turning them into mush. Without wasting a second, Kylie grabs his hand firmly and tells him that, first of all, they are going to perform an aura and magic potion examination to check if anything is already wrong inside his body. Finally, Kylie takes Luz to get a blood test. Luz allows his blood to be introduced into a special potion for its analysis, while the principal inspects it personally. After studying the results carefully, the principal realizes that the situation is extremely strange. There is absolutely no sign of mental recovery, nor that the potion's erosion is affecting Luz's brain. In fact, the opposite seems to be happening, as his brain activity seems even more active and stimulated than before. Kylie protests immediately upon hearing this, because she insists that Luz is clearly showing abnormal behavior lately. She points out that suddenly he goes blank sometimes, and that, just a few moments before, an overwhelming amount of energy was gushing from his body like something monstrous. She also explains that he gives off such a terrifying killing intent that even she feels uneasy about it. The principal admits that Kylie's concerns are valid and worrying, but considering the fact that Luz's magical power is actually increasing instead of deteriorating, he wonders if this phenomenon could be some kind of enlightenment peculiar to someone like Luz. At the same time, another possibility crosses his mind, and he silently wonders if this could be related to the mysterious traits linked to the cursed child. That thought immediately awakens the principal's curiosity even more, and he asks Luz to explain in greater detail everything he experiences. As the conversation continues, the principal begins to talk about enlightenment itself and the origins of magical power, commenting on how magic is governed by the goddess, and questioning whether both humans and monsters are really meant to possess such power in the first place. After reflecting deeply on all of it, the principal finally comes to the conclusion that the world is already full of countless strange mysteries that nobody fully understands at all. Therefore, he believes that, for now, they should include this incident among those inexplicable phenomena. Instead of rushing to draw conclusions too quickly, Kylie keeps trying to argue that something must undoubtedly be wrong inside Luz's body. But the principal stands firm and begins to walk away. However, after taking a few steps, he suddenly stops and turns to her. He explains to her that studies on alchemy and magic potions are still incomplete and are subject to constant research, which means that no one fully understands how these potions really affect the human body. Once Luz's unusual condition is added to the equation, everything becomes even more confusing than before. Kylie replies that perhaps Luz is also hiding other secrets. Meanwhile, Luz listens silently to the whole discussion while reflecting carefully to himself. He realizes that the alchemy of this world simply fuses materials in their natural state, which probably causes certain compositions to conflict with each other. Therefore, he believes that if the unnecessary components are removed and a highly purified potion is created instead, then it should be possible to identify exactly which ingredient is causing the harmful side effects. The next day, the principal gathers Kylie and Luz again. Luz feels excited because the principal has managed to gather so many materials and supplies for him in such a short time. Kylie takes a look at all the bottles and ingredients gathered there and asks what exactly Luz intends to do with all of that, since the principal normally never engages in potion making in such a strange way. Luz simply tells her to wait patiently because she will soon understand everything. Without wasting time, he gets to work immediately after spending a lot of time experimenting and perfecting the ingredients. Finally, he creates 3 distinct potions and proudly declares that the process has been a success. The principal observes the results in total disbelief, as he realizes that Luz has managed to successfully extract each of the components contained in the original ones. At that moment, the principal becomes convinced that Luz truly possesses God-level talent. Emotion fills his voice when he asks Luz if he would ever consider seriously studying magic potions with someone like him. He tells Luz that, with talent of this level, one day he could become a prominent authority in the study of potions, and perhaps even surpass Lady Melian himself. One day, the principal sincerely believes that such a future is possible for him. Luz respectfully replies that studying with the principal would be an incredible honor for him, and that he would be delighted to learn from him. Upon hearing that, the principal looks visibly proud, and the two begin to form a bond thanks to their shared passion for knowledge and research. Kylie, however, clearly dislikes seeing how an increasingly strong connection is being forged between them. Later that night, Luz continues studying magic theory on his own, while reflecting deeply on the nature of the potions he creates, and realizes that the magical energy contained in those potions comes from the ingredients themselves. Given that potions are made from natural plants, and that plants need soil and water to grow, he begins to connect those ideas in his mind. Earth and water naturally symbolize life itself. Suddenly, a powerful revelation strikes him like a lightning bolt. At that precise moment, a violent reaction occurs. On the table in front of him, Kylie watches in astonishment, unable to believe that this strange phenomenon is happening once again. Somehow, Luz reaches another moment of enlightenment deep in his heart. Instantly, huge vines and roots begin to spread uncontrollably throughout the room. The principal watches in total amazement as huge trees and forests suddenly spring up all over the gigantic room. For him, it is simply impossible that the true power hidden in potions could create something like this. At that moment, Luz calmly explains that the true power behind creation is not something grandiose or destructive. Instead, it is the simple act of giving moisture to the soil, nourishing life, and allowing new growth to sprout naturally. Thanks to that understanding, Luz declares that this power should be called the wood element. Kylie looks completely confused after hearing the term wood element. For the first time, in response, Luz simply raises a finger and makes a beautiful flower bloom before her eyes. When Kylie approaches it with curiosity, the flower suddenly releases dangerous pollen. Ready to attack her, she doesn't react in time, and the pollen causes her hand to turn red. Immediately after, the vines surrounding the room transform into monstrous plants and begin to attack her directly. Furious at the sudden attack, Kylie unleashes her fire element and destroys the vines that are attacking her. Although the fight leaves her with several minor wounds, even while fighting them, Kylie realizes something terrifying. Luz not only creates completely new plant life through magic, but also controls those creations to attack others. And the speed at which his skills evolve is totally incredible. Luz calmly responds that creating plants is not even the true strength of the wood element. According to him, its greatest power lies in something completely different. It is the power of healing itself. Upon hearing that, the principal immediately realizes something important. If Luz's theory is correct, then the principles behind recovery potions and healing balms could, in reality, have their origin in the power of the wood attribute from the beginning. Luz agrees and states that the possibility is extremely high. He explains that the main difference between common plants and magic potions lies in whether they contain elemental properties or not. The principal gets increasingly excited upon realizing that compound elements, potions and alchemy could be fundamentally connected to each other. Due to this discovery, he immediately tells Luz that he himself will provide him with all the potion materials he needs for future experiments and research. Luz sincerely thanks him for the support, but the principal just laughs and says, "There is no need to thank me, because if Luz continues making discoveries like this, he will probably end up doing all the exhausting work himself later on." However, before the conversation can end, the principal decides to ask Luz one last question. He tells him that, in the human world, strength alone is only part of the equation, and that if someone truly desires to obtain the power necessary to change destiny itself, there are much more complicated truths awaiting him beyond simple strength. Next, the principal takes Luz to the forest, where Luz activates his newly developed wood element and makes life spring directly from the ground beneath his feet. Once again, the principal is visibly astonished, because no matter how many times he witnesses this phenomenon, it still seems unnatural to him that such valuable plants can grow so fast and effortlessly. Thanks to this method, Luz is not only able to generate plants from almost anywhere on the ground, but he can also produce edible resources in a very short time. However, Luz explains that this ability consumes much more magical power than he initially expected. He adds that the more valuable the plant, the greater the amount of magical power needed to create it. Due to that limitation, he admits that what he is currently demonstrating is already his maximum output for now. Still, the principal remains satisfied with the results and reflects that everything in this world always has a price. In his opinion, the true difference lies in how that price compares to others. And in Luz's case, the cost is still much lower than what anyone would normally expect. The principal then states that the fact that Luz purifies potions, reduces their side effects, and even develops completely new ones using wood attribute magic is an extraordinary achievement. He highlights that such progress is not something just anyone could achieve, and that it can only be accomplished by someone with Luz's unique abilities. Shortly after, as they leave the forest together, it is revealed that they have established a whole laboratory inside the Candria Arcanist Academy, located in a system of underground caves. In these hidden facilities, they create special recovery potions, mana restoration potions, body enhancement potions, and mental recovery potions as part of their ongoing experiments. The principal then takes one of the newly created potions and decides that it is time to test its side effects directly. He comments that, if Luz truly wishes to become stronger quickly, fighting against strong opponents is the best form of training available. Therefore, he suggests testing the potions through a combat between them. This idea immediately excites Luz, who sees it as the perfect opportunity. Without hesitation, he tells the principal not to hold back at all. He drinks the potion and immediately prepares to fight the principal himself. Soon a battle breaks out between them, and as it unfolds, Kylie watches everything with an astonished expression. Silently, she thinks that Luz is truly a monster in his own way, even if he is not necessarily evil or has dangerous intentions. His nature is undeniably monstrous in terms of raw capacity and growth. Later, Luz returns to his room and takes a shower while reflecting on the previous fight. He realizes that the principal did not hold back one bit during their confrontation. In fact, if he hadn't developed the new potions beforehand, he probably would have been bedridden for a whole month due to the injuries sustained. While resting, he begins to think about what kind of new potions he could develop next, and on how he can improve his skills even further. However, when Luz enters his room, Kara is already there, curiously looking at an empty potion bottle. Luz is immediately surprised and gets a little nervous to see him there. Kara calmly asks what the bottle is, and Luz lies quickly, saying that the principal gave it to him for his safety, and that it is part of an approved technique for potion development. However, Kara does not believe this explanation at all. Without hesitation, he walks directly toward Luz, which makes Luz increasingly nervous, thinking that perhaps he has been caught. Actually, Kara immediately confesses that he is the one who created the potion. Luz tries to deny it quickly and claims that the accusation is unfounded, but no matter how hard he tries to explain himself, it is obvious that he is a terrible liar. In the end, he gives up and admits the truth, asking how Kara managed to figure it out. Kara explains that he observes Luz closely and deduces everything from his subtle reactions and his behavior. Luz feels a little uncomfortable realizing how perceptive Kara is, but he still asks him not to tell anyone because he wants to avoid unnecessary problems. At that moment, Kara takes out a written contract and shows it to him. When Luz reads it, he realizes that the conditions are, in fact, quite favorable. The agreement allows for diluting the potions before their distribution, which helps not to attract attention. Next, Kara puts the potion into a container and explains to him that Luz must allow the trading company to handle the distribution to keep his identity hidden. In exchange, Luz will also get benefits from the agreement, making it a mutually beneficial deal. After reading everything carefully, Luz realizes that, with Kara's support, he can obtain both resources and protection while continuing his research freely. He accepts that the offer is good, but insists on two conditions. First, the effects of the potion must be toned down before sale to avoid unnecessary complications. Second, the trading company must provide aid to the orphanage where he grew up. Kara immediately accepts both conditions, includes them directly in the contract, and returns it to Luz. Both sign it, formally sealing their agreement and forming a new partnership. As he leaves, Luz mentions that he will prepare more potions the next day, and that he should go to bed early. Kara watches him leave before returning to his own room in the residence. However, after separating, two assassin-like doves suddenly infiltrate the residence area and try to approach Kara from behind. Despite their stealth, Kara reacts immediately and defends himself. One of the intruders feels frustrated and confused because, although she has managed to enter without being detected, she has not managed to launch any attack. The other quickly apologizes for the intrusion and explains that they have only come to deliver urgent information before leaving again. At that moment, it is revealed that Kara is actually a girl who disguises her identity to be able to attend the academy. Next, she hands the contract to her two apprentices, who react with bewilderment because they do not understand why such an important agreement has been signed specifically for Luz. One of them comments that, if this plan succeeds, their trading company could become one of the most influential in the eastern regions. The other apprentice is equally impressed, but wonders how a boy as young as Luz could have even devised such an agreement. Kara silently acknowledges that Luz possesses extraordinary potential. The apprentices then ask what would happen if Luz ended up betraying them or supporting another heir to the throne. In response, Kara states that that is precisely why she has a request for them. She explains that she intends to secure control of the orphanage because she believes that Luz is, deep down, a kind person and deserves protection. After giving her orders, she dismisses both apprentices, who transform back into doves, and fly away. Kara then looks at the moon, and, thinking that the midterm exam period is approaching, she realizes that they must accelerate their plans, because, right now, the only thing she really hopes for is that Luz ends up revealing his true identity to the heir to the throne. The story is about an ordinary boy who enters an academy where strength decides everything. And little by little, he proves that even without status, he can become the most dangerous player. From the first humiliation to the moment, he discovers a new power and begins to break the rules of that world. Luz grows before our eyes, going from being a nobody to someone that even the teachers begin to fear. This is interesting because there are not only fights, there is also intelligence. He is not only strong, but he thinks differently, creates new approaches, a new magic, and new rules of the game. The atmosphere of constant pressure, competition, and hidden threats maintains the tension until the end. But to be honest, the story can sometimes feel a bit saturated. The protagonist becomes strong too quickly, and that pace is not for everyone. Some might feel it lacks deeper development of the supporting characters, or a more gradual growth. Still, there's something that hooks you. Maybe it's the protagonist's determination to keep going even when the whole world is against him. And what do you think? Is he a genius who will change the world, or a monster who still has a lot to prove? From you, a subscription and a like, and from me, many more new stories.